I would like to welcome everybody to the Tuesday, March 9th, 2021 virtual legislative board meeting of the Cheltenham School District Board of Directors. Call the meeting to order, and I'll ask Mr. Schultz to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. And it's now time for recognitions. I'll turn it over to Ms. Robinson, principal of Glenside Elementary School.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I am here this evening to share about one of my favorite topics, Glenside Elementary, and just kind of give an overview of how's it going now that we are in hybrid after all the planning and time that the team has put together to sort of make this happen for remote and in-person scholars. So thank you for this opportunity to share. Let's see. All right. So I have to admit to you, one of the two areas of the day that made me most nervous as we walked into this transition was arrival and dismissal and the monitoring tool, right? And so I have to tell you that the parents are doing a phenomenal job of completing the monitoring tool. We have very few students for whom we need to make phone calls. We have greeters at the door greeting the scholars as they come in. We have, as you can see in the picture here below, we have greeters at the bus stop, greeting the students as they get off the bus and just making sure that everyone has a really good start to their day. And we are done, we're ready, we're all in classrooms by 9 a.m. Dismissal, I would say, is the same way. We have our buses are on time. The scholars have sort of their routine of getting on the bus. The parents come a little early. The staggered start is working out really well. And our car line is moving. And parents are doing a great job of allowing us to work together to get students in the cars. And our main goal, as I've shared with the community, is to keep the cars out the street so that we don't create too much traffic, and things are going really, really well. Lots of teamwork in that area. The classrooms are amazing. The teachers have been so creative with their setups. There are some classrooms with projectors to sort of like make the room feel like, so the remote scholars can feel like they're sitting inside the classroom. There's extra devices that I've seen teachers use to, again, make scholars have like sort of that classroom view. So anything that teachers can do, from using the document cameras on up to try to make the experience still feel as one. The teachers have been doing an excellent job. We're in the process now of reestablishing and giving booster lessons on our remote in-person norms and routines. There's lots of great engagement through use of the breakout rooms and other engagement strategies that we've learned along the way. And some of the wonderful PD that the district has provided for teachers. And there's just simply high quality instruction. I'm just really, really happy with the work that the teachers have been doing. And I love that they are working together to get it done. Everybody's sort of building on each other's strengths, which is wonderful. Lunch and recess, the second area that made me a little nervous, but it's going well. There's active supervision, teamwork with the staff to get the tables cleaned in between times, smooth transition into the recess zones. That's been wonderful. Everyone goes out, they're in their zone, they have their recess bag, they're playing and they're having fun. And so that's been going really well. I have to say, in this area, I don't know what I would do without the class staff. So it's been so wonderful to have some extra hands on board to help with all of the transitions that happen in this area. And so I'm really thankful for that. And you can see here's a little picture of students eating in the lunchroom. And here's a picture of a couple of our zones where students can play. And then our specialist teachers, I can't say enough, they are pushing into classrooms, they are supporting in the afternoon. We have a library, the library check-in, check-out system that was set up with IT, and our librarian is going really well. They're making concurrent instruction work. You see here at the bottom right is the phys ed classroom. And so there's the screen there where the students can follow along, those that are in person, but then the remote scholars are also seeing that on their screen, where Ms. Nathan is able to provide supervision and support to the remote scholars. And it just happens at the same time. And it's just really wonderful how things are going there. We also have our safe library book checkout system and protocols, which is nice for students to be able to check out library books and read still and return their books. And we quarantine the books for a while, and then we get them back on the shelves, and it's going really well. Any remote scholar can call us and we'll bring them out a bag of books that's around their level and around their interests, and it's just working out really well. Our safety nets, probably the most important part of our school, are active and in place. Our multi-tier system of support, we meet bi-weekly and talk about students and try to address their needs through a variety of interventions. Our student assistant program is really there to connect families to outside resources that may be needed. We have an active positive behavior support plan that's in place. And each trimester, we have an area that we want to focus on. And this trimester, with the transition, we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose any students, that everyone was engaged and participating. And so there were lots of incentives for doing that, including on Wednesdays, a lunch and recess, a virtual lunch and recess room, which is nice because they get to meet as a grade. And so with us being cohorts, you really are only seeing the students in your class. But the Wednesday program allows you to see students across your grade, which is really nice. And then of course, we have our active grade team meetings and faculty meetings to discuss the needs of staff and students. There are always challenges to things that we do, and we're still adjusting to a few things. So one, coverages continue to be an area that we are trying to continue to work out in terms of how do we make sure that we can keep the concurrent instruction going. And so that's been an area that we're working on. And then also connectivity challenges that, at no fault of the district, you know, sometimes with the MCIU or something that's going on nationwide, can impact instruction. And so we're all sort of, okay, what's our plan when that happens? But everyone has been, again, super flexible and super supportive, especially families around substitutes. When we had the vaccine and we had a number of teachers that were going out because they were getting their second vaccine, the comments that I received back from families was really, do what you need to do. We are patient, we understand. It was just really nice to have that amount of grace and patience from the families to support us. If I had to identify a few highlights of that's happening at Glenside, first and foremost, really not first and foremost, there's two that are just standing out right now. Our new student ambassador program, these scholars, it's a group of students. This is a picture of their presentation up here. They met with all new students in each grade and put together a presentation to share with them about the school and about our norms and things that they can expect and find out about at Glenside and ask questions, which was really nice. These were virtual meetings that they prepared for on Wednesdays. And then they sent invitation out to new families, and then students joined them to participate in those meetings. Our fourth grade safety program, oh my goodness. I can't say enough. You can even check social media. They're talking about it on there now as well. The safeties are wonderful. They help the kindergarten and first graders get to class. If you know how to get to class, they're going to be there to greet you. And they help with traffic. I mean, they do it all. They're just really bright spots in the beginning of our day. And then we've been doing a lot with our anti-racism professional development and learning with staff and students, and that's been going well. My wonderful counselor, Mr. D, he cycles through every grade, every classroom, and he continues the learning with students that teachers work with him in terms of their asynchronous work that they'll give to students. So it's been really nice that the things that we're learning, anti-racism, professional development, the students are learning as well. Read Across America Week went really well last week. Shout out to the dads and the neighbors and the grandfathers and the uncles and just the special men in our children's lives. All 21 rooms had folks to come and read to them during our Read Across America Day. And so I just want to say thank you for them for that. And then we've been able to still have our assemblies. We have one coming up this month on the 24th, but really just a time to come together as a school and either celebrate an activity. We celebrate Black History Month, Martin Luther King birthday, and we're having a magic show this month. So we're really excited about that. And my shameless plug here, probably funds won't allow it, but with the high school being remote, we had the pleasure of having Ms. Mumford, who is a school safety support. She has been amazing with her support of every aspect of our day. She's just been wonderful. So thank you, Ms. Mumford. And then again, I mentioned earlier the class support. I think all but one of our class staff returned to help throughout the day, and it's just been wonderful. Enough from me. I'm going to give you an opportunity to hear from staff and students. Ms. Mumford gave a quote. She said, "Although I've only been assigned to Glenside Elementary School a few weeks, I've been privileged to witness the staff's dedication to adhering to health and safety protocols, as well as continuing support for scholars, education, and emotional support." So that was from Mrs. Mumford. And here, I'm going to let you hear from students and staff. We're going to start with Quincy.
My name is Quincy. I'm 5 years old. I like school.
What do you like about school, Quincy? What do you like the most so far?
Recess.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're gonna say go? My name is Hazel, and they've been good.
And what grade are you in?
Room 6.
You're in room 6? Kindergarten. And what do you like about school so far?
Because Mr. Rackel's funny.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Janai, and school is awesome.
And why is it awesome, Janai?
Because I love school, and it's just that I love doing foundations, and I just love doing all activities.
Awesome, thank you.
And we have 2 remote scholars sharing.
Go. Hi, my name is Danny Browner. I'm in 2nd grade, and I think the first 30 days of school were awesome. I think, like, in 2nd grade, it was awesome. I like to learn. My favorite subject is to do math. I think it's really cool.
You think it's going awesome?
I kind of don't like it, but I because I wanted to say I wanted to be in the class this year.
I know, I remember. But what do you like so far? What do you like about it so far? What do you not like? Tell me what you like first.
I like that I still get to see all my friends, and I still get to see Avery most of the time. And I like that that now after my little sister's birthday, she's coming into my school with me.
Nice.
And yeah, I like most of that stuff.
Yeah.
My name is Addison Bay, and I'm in 3rd grade, room 21, and the first 30 days of school was really fun.
And why is it been fun?
Because we did a lot of cool stuff.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gracie Lamb, and I'm in 4th grade. And the first 30 days have been really great, and I really like that we got to rotate all the specials, and Dr. Seuss week has been really fun.
Hi, I'm Brianna Brown. I'm in 4th grade, and the 30 days have been going for me. The first 30 days of school has been fun and challenging. I'm a safety too. Being a safety is mainly helping students around the school and making sure they do the right things. Bye.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Clofey, new 1st grade teacher. It's been a great year, actually. I really have loved this year, and I'm glad everyone's back in the building. I do miss my babies at home, and I do miss having centers and a U table, but it's really been well.
Hi, my name is Stacy Blum. I'm a learning support teacher here at Glenside Elementary School, and I just want to say that it's been a really smooth transition from being in person at Cheltenham Elementary School and then coming back here to Glenside, and I'm just hoping it stays that way.
Hi everyone, I'm Mr. D, the school counselor here at Glenside Elementary School. The first 30 days have been going well. I feel like a lot of the new procedures and safeguards that we have in place have provided a little more structure for the students, and they're feeling safe and comfortable. As a result, I feel at recess, we have different zones that the students now play in and are led in an activity by the recess aide versus a more unstructured time. Also with lunchtime, they have specific places that they sit in the cafeteria, and getting the lunches, they're pre-made and much more easier to grab. So I just feel like we've added certain things into place that have benefited the school, and I hope we can maybe keep a couple of those things moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. D.
And last but not least, our para, Tony Parker.
Hello, my name is Parker. I'm a paraprofessional for special education, and everything's going well. And one thing I really do like about our school is that everyone is being safe, and we are all looking out for each other, helping each other, and being friendly.
All right, I think I need to exit in order to get to my next slide. All right, and so that's it. That's how the first 30 days have been going. We're continue to take it each day at a time. All of the folks here that I've mentioned, to the teachers, scholars, parents, Dr. Marseille, Dr. Smith, Dr. Gallagher, the IT department, Ms. Lewis, everyone. I mean, you can see the names here, really have been a joint effort to make this happen, and we couldn't have pulled it off without the support that everyone has provided. So well, at Glenside, these are our 5 norms: be safe, be respectful, be responsible, be truthful, be kind. And we're looking forward to being able to do that for the rest of the year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Robinson. I appreciate very much your report. It was heartwarming to see all the students and all the great work getting done at Glenside Elementary, and some sense of normalcy.
Thank you.
Before we move to the next item on the agenda, I would like to just let the members of the public who are attending know some of the ground rules for tonight's meeting. We have made it possible for members of the public to speak. There's always, every legislative meeting has 2 times when members of the public can make comments or ask questions. The first is when I call for comments or questions on agenda items only, and that comes early in the meeting. You can review the agenda online and find what our agenda items are, and if you have comments about them, you can raise them at that time in the meeting. We're going to ask that everyone who is on Zoom ask their questions during that time verbally. We would prefer not to be, we're not going to be answering questions that are put into the question box because it's just too cumbersome. We had too much of that last time and it didn't work well. So we're giving you the opportunity to ask questions or make comments verbally the 2 times that we traditionally do in these meetings, and we're going to stick to that. So if you've already put a question in the question and answer box. Remember to ask it at the time for either agenda items or non-agenda item questions. If you are watching this through streaming, we have an email address, and only people who are watching through streaming, we will send their questions to, if you could scroll down, I don't have it memorized, Dr. Marseille. It will be CSD board meeting comments at cheltenham.org. So if you're watching through streaming, that will be on your screen when it's time to ask questions at either of the times in the meeting. And if you're going to ask a question, we're going to ask that you do it through that email. And those are the only two ways that your comments will be considered tonight or your questions will be answered tonight. And I apologize if that is cumbersome, but it will best replicate the way we do our meetings in person. So with that, we can go back to where we were on the agenda. Thank you, Dr. Marseille. And it's now time for a presentation by Mr. Blackwell. Take it away.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Sorry for my delay. I had to run down to my office. We had a home playoff game right now, district playoff game going on. So please pardon my delay in this. But tonight, I plan on just going through, give some updates on what's taking place in regards to our fall alternate and spring 2020-21 sports. Of course, we want to offer the safest things possible for our student athletes, also while following the, all of the updated guidelines with the CDC and local and whatever our governor has in place. Starting out with fall alternative season, we started March 1st. The first season contest is March 13th. Our football team actually kicks off at Harry S. Truman High School Saturday night at 7 p.m. Rest of the sports start the following week. Minimum practice length that we had was 2 weeks. And the United 10, that's the fall alternate league that we're in, is going to last for 6 weeks. So the teams we have participating are boys cross country, field hockey, football, boys and girls soccer, girls volleyball, and sideline cheer. Going into spring, that started March 8th. The first regular season contest is slated to start March 26th. This is from PIAA. The season length is 11 weeks. And teams participating are baseball, girls lacrosse, softball, boys tennis, boys and girls track and field, boys volleyball. Club sport is ultimate frisbee. Also, clubs that we have taking place also will be our pep band from during this fall time. And we have color guard going as well. So I don't want to forget about them. Looking at the phases that we're in, we are in phase 2 where we've had our tryouts, we've had our practices. The practice timeline is within a 3-hour time frame, 2:30 to 5:30 p.m. All coaches are ending at 5:30 p.m. They can start as early as 2:30. Some coaches start as late as 4 or 3:30, 3 o'clock, whatever fits their schedule. There are no practices on weekends. All practices are taking place on CHS grounds with the trainer and administrator present. And on inclement weather days, There are 2 practice slots, one at 2:30 to 5:20 and one 2:30 to 3:50 and one 4 p.m. to 5:20. So on those days, teams have the options to move indoors as we split out space in the gymnasium area around the athletic area. Same for spring sports. Now, how are we utilizing our fields? The fact that we are outside, all the snow is off the field. It's a breath of fresh air. Our field hockey team, they use the front field. Our football team uses the practice field. Baseball outfield. Girls tennis, of course, they're on the tennis courts. Girls volleyball are either in the main gym or the small gym. Baseball is using the varsity baseball field. Girls lacrosse, they switch between the JV softball field, the field hockey / lacrosse field when field hockey completes their practice, or when they have games, we utilize a portion of the football practice field to put them there. Softball is at the varsity softball field. Boys tennis is on the tennis courts. Boys and girls track on the track and field, and boys volleyball is in the main gym as well. So looking at this, wanted to just share these numbers. New guidance came out as far as what the percentage went up as far as what you can allow. Looking at where we are well below the numbers that we need to be as far as doing anything that we're doing with practices and staying safe, following all the CDC guidelines. We are practicing and competing with masks and doing those things, and we are socially distancing. We're doing a very good job at that. So as far as safety measures, I have pictures up here that you can see. We're still doing the same things that we did in the winter time. We're screening when students and coaches are coming in. They're still coming inside. Once the weather really breaks and gets a little warmer outside, less wind, we will move the setup outside so students just come up so they could get screened and go through our process there and go on down to where they need to practice. Safety measures, we're still following everything. We're thoroughly wiping down whether it's balls, a baton if it's being used, frisbee, mats, all those things. It's secondhand now for the coaches. Equipment, student athletes know as well as coaches that is no sharing of equipment. Most people are bringing their own equipment in sports such as baseball, football. Of course, everyone has their own helmets. Volleyball, everyone has their own knee pads. Tennis, everyone has their own rackets. So these are the things that we're doing. Cheer, palms, there's no sharing of palms or anything like that. Teams who are wearing their mouth guards, they refrain from taking those out. They do a good job with that as well. Now going into CHS Panther Pep Band. This is their schedule. They started their first virtual meeting March 8th. They have 2 in-person practices, and they will play at the 2 home football games. We are in the process of ordering safety equipment that the NFHS had recommended for our horn section so that we are being safe when it comes to projectile droplets. Safety measures, percussion will be masked at all times, woodwind brass mask at all times. Exception, they will pull their mask down to play their instruments, but they will be socially distanced while doing that. And as I mentioned, we will have the protected bags and shields that will be provided. Also, CHS Color Guard, they will be participating in the TIA 2021 virtual competitions. They started practice yesterday, so they will be in 2 days out the week for about 2 hours to 2.5 hours working on their show and doing the things they need to do. They will be back in the small gym, and they're following all of the guidelines that our sports safety plan has in place. CBK Sports, spring sports there, slated to start April 5th, which is a little bit delayed from the high school. They'll be offering baseball, boys lacrosse, girls lacrosse, softball, boys tennis, and boys and girls track and field. Boys lacrosse is a new sport that we are adding there. One thing that we have been talking about is creating a feeder system. We haven't been able to offer boys lacrosse at the high school for about 5 years now. So the plan is to start it at CBK so we could build up interest, and then those students will come right on into the high school to get that program back resurging, and they will follow the same safety plan that they did, that we had in the winter, that they're doing now. Looking at safety measures during contests, we will do the same things that we did in the winter. We will put benches where they need to be, just making sure that students are socially distancing, wearing their mask. And of course, you know, as we're looking at going through, looking at the tiers, still studying that, looking at where we are, looking at some new CDC stuff that came out, you know, looking at opening things up for outside to see how we could do those things to allow fans and but under protocols of Cheltenham School District. So that's still being worked on. Have to look at how we could roll those things for outside. For inside, we will remain the same for now, but we will continue to monitor and look, you know, to see what we will do. Live streaming is always a consideration what we're doing for fall, alternate, and spring sports. And the students did a good job, you know, with the live stream during games for winter. And right now, an important next steps is staying up on game schedules, getting travel going for those teams. But before I end out, I definitely want to say that we had a very good winter. I want to shout out the coaches. I want to shout out the student athletes for being flexible. And looking at it, we had 22 all-conference student athletes in the wintertime, 16 from swimming and diving combined. We had 5 all-league honors on the boys basketball team and 1 all-league honor on the girls basketball team. So I just wanted to shout them out, and our boys who are the #1 seed in 6A, they are taking on Methacton right now in our gymnasium. So with that said, I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. It is a testament to our athletes' resilience that they performed at the level they have. The swim team's success this season has been greater than I ever remember a swim team having. And the basketball team 2 years in a row, it must be the coaching, because it's not just the players. Coach Flory seems to have gotten something right with this coaching program. So thank you, Mr. Blackwell. Dr. Marseille.
I didn't know, Mr. Fishbein, if you wanted to open up for the board to have any questions. Before we move to the next topic, or you want me to go through, just go to the next presentation around update on the high school?
I hadn't considered the idea of board questions, but if the board has any questions for Mr. Blackwell, please raise your hand now. I see one raised hand. Can't see who it is. Mr. Cohen.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Blackwell, for the presentation, all the good work that was done. I did want to note a minor concern, though, in that I saw several photos on social media where they were taken with the student athletes wearing masks, which is a good thing, but they were side by side as if it were in non-pandemic times. And that might have been an anomaly. I would just want to bring that to your attention, and just hopefully in the future, even though I know it's very hard to not take those group photos and to be part of a community, that there just be some consideration about reminding the students, athletes, and also the coaches about that practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Any other board questions or comments? Seeing none. Oh, Ms. Lohman.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Blackwell, you and your team for such a great, all the work that you've done to make the winter sports and now the fall alternate and the spring sports reality. I know that this has been kind of a Herculean task for you and your team, so I appreciate all the efforts that have been put in. And also, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time to bring this up or if I should wait until the facilities report. I think Mr. England and Mr. Burdell Williams may know where I'm going with this, and Dr. Mercier as well. But I had put in a request to the facilities co-chairs to have the administration consider reopening the use of the outdoor facilities to the public at some point, allowing the public to use the basketball courts and the tennis courts and any other places in the district that might have otherwise been, sort of off limits for the past year. So I'm not sure if this is the right place to do that or wait or.
Ms. Lohman, you're a board member, so you have the mic, so it's always a. But I thank you for that, and I want to thank the board members who reached out to me in anticipation of this question. So I appreciate that. We do anticipate on opening, giving access to the public. We are working on what that will look like post spring break. It is going to be challenging in the sense, and we'll learn from our colleagues who have been doing it. But we are one of the few, and I don't know if Mr. Blackwell can confirm this, but we have 14 sports happening at the same time. That's unprecedented in light of the fact that we are taking fall sports, shifting it into the spring, piggybacking it on the other sports. So we wanted to get that off the ground in terms of how do we manage that. As you know, scheduling fields was challenging as it is with a regular season, let alone the other 8 sports that are currently there right now. So what we want to do, and my intentions was to wait till the spring break and begin to allow individuals in our township the opportunity to apply for field usage. We can send communication out, whether it comes from my office or Mr. Teasdale, and we'll have that phased in. What we are going to say in that communication is that we need to temper expectations with regards to the scheduling of those requests. As you know, we have a very difficult time with respects to the demand of the community with using the fields and balancing that with prioritizing the needs of our students. Now that we have 8 additional sports that are using that, we are going to let our neighbors know that they may not get the same type of schedule. I don't think anyone should expect that, considering we're all living in COVID-19 and nothing is the way it used to. But we intend to open those doors for that and begin transitioning that after spring break. So this is the right time to bring that up.
Great, thank you, Dr. Mercier. I personally look forward to being able to use the district's tennis courts, but that's just me when they are reopened. So thank you for that update.
Well, you might have to wait because we'll get the kids on first, but then we'll more than happy get you on there.
I apologize in advance for the dogs barking in the background. I have no control over that. I want to reiterate the rules of the road for the meeting. I noticed that there are hands raised in the attendees section of the participants, and we are not going to be taking questions except during the 2 times in the meeting when the public is permitted to ask questions. I reiterate that now because I see a hand raised, and I'm not being rude in ignoring you. It's just not the time that we will call on the public. And a thing that I forgot to mention the last time I talked on this subject, if you intend to ask a question or think you might ask a question, please change your screen name from whatever it is now to your name and where you live in the township: Wyncote, Glenside, Elkins Park, Cheltenham, Lavrock, that kind of thing. So we'll know that you're a member of the community. Thank you. And we can move on to the next agenda item. Was it Dr. Marseille? Dr. Marseille.
Yes, my apologies. I'm trying to pull up the PowerPoint presentation. Can you hear me?
I can. I wasn't sure if you were on mute, but I didn't mean to be impatient. I just...
No, that's okay. I was on mute trying to explain myself. So
happens to the best of us.
I'm trying to find the right presentation. Can you tell me what you see on your screen right now?
That's the right one, boss.
High school return to hybrid learning options is what I see on the screen now.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have too many screens open. Thank you for your patience while I fumbled through that. I am joined this evening by Dr. Lahada, who really is the point person for this conversation. And I want to thank him and his team for putting together the slide deck, even though I will be co-facilitating this with him. They've been, him and his team, Dr. Hammond, Mrs. Zubeiru, Mr. Metcalf, and Ms. Felgois have been working like all of us, but they've been really attempting to think critically through options with respects to what are those opportunities for us to return the high school much sooner to an in-person experience. And they've been plugging at some of those data points, and we wanted to share with you some of our findings. So I'll be going through some of the slides, and then I will proverbially pass that baton to Dr. Lahada, who will finish the rest of the slide deck. And then Mr. Fishbein, you can open that up for questions that the board may have. As always, we remain grounded and clear with regards to our mission and vision and what that means for our work and the lens in which we do that work. So with that, what we're going to present to you tonight or share with you tonight are, and I'm sure there's probably someone out there who's going to say there was an option E, F, G, H, and I. So that's fine. But we were thinking about what options are available in light of the challenges we're having at the high school, that after 2 days of providing in-person instruction that required us to shift to a full remote model with the hopes that we could come back. And what we're looking at are really 4 options that the team has vetted, considered, and probably the top 4, like I said, there's probably a lot more, but those were the ones that rose to the surface. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means in terms of bringing students back in these large spaces so that they can get in-person instruction, and what's the impact on that on the student body and the impact it's had on staffing as well. So these 4 models, and we're going to go through each of those. But I wanted to give some context to last time we talked. The challenge was the extent of the number of teachers, professionals who are on leave, and where they fall within the areas or departments. And this is important because it provides context to what some of these large spaces will look like. And that you can and you will have a multitude of, depending on the option, of students under multiple disciplines in one area being provided instruction, and some of the opportunities that that brings, but also some of the challenges with that as well. So, you know, take a mental picture of the multiple experiences or curriculum experiences that are happening, the potential it could be happening under one roof as we try to make this work. And we know that we have that challenge about how many students that this impacts in terms of the schedule, and anticipating really the extent in which some of our staff members who did take leave. There is a couple, I don't know, I forgot the exact dates upon the return, but we know that we have a couple who are returning the first week of April from their leave. So that helps significantly, because it is really all about the staffing and the number of individuals we have who can provide qualified supervision of our students. So when we look at this, and the high school put this together and looked at the data, we wanted to give you a quick snapshot of what that looks like on the impact of those teachers with those days. And the reality is, looking at multiple periods, we're talking about, for example, period 1, you have 106 students who will need supervision. And what you can do is that the manner in which we've been social distancing and keeping those class sizes relative to the square footage that is available in the high school, I believe, and Dr. Lahada, when he comes up, can try to correct me if I'm wrong, that we do have between 9 and 13 or 14 max in those in a room, so we can have 6 feet social distancing. We're not getting any closer than that. So, and on period 1, on a given day, we have 106 students. If we decided to navigate those students to classrooms, we would need, that's 10 classrooms, and we need the individuals in order to supervise those, and so forth with regards to period 2, period 5, 6, period 7, and 8. So we wanted to give you a context of the total number of students per period impacted by those 15 teachers in terms of supervision, and the classrooms we would need in order to do that. This is the same thing, but it's reflected on Tuesdays and Fridays as well. You can see on Tuesday we have 114 of those students, and the classes that total number of classes that would take if we did it, try to do it that way. One of the challenges, and I think we've talked about this a couple of times at Ed Affairs, but you'd really have to be an active Ed Affairs community member to recall this, but it is archived in terms of our meetings. This current challenge does not take in consideration the fact that we have a high average of teacher absences on any given day for a myriad of reasons. And one of the things that this calendar year that individuals have repeatedly said was that, and this is for education, this is for everything else, that COVID-19 really has just put a spotlight and accentuated what often was already there, right? So when people share with me their significant concerns about equity and COVID inequity, I tend to chagrin and say, well, things have been inequitable for a very long time, long before COVID. What COVID is doing is just making that significantly worse for those who are marginalized. The same way when people talk about how COVID-19 is ravaging the African-American Black community, my response is, if you look at the history of healthcare for people of color, that's been like that for a very long time. COVID just really made it highlighted and significantly worse. What COVID is doing for us is that it's making our average daily absences pre-COVID significantly harder to manage in light of that. And what we've tried to do, and some individuals who say, well, you shouldn't even try to open in the first place, you should have stayed virtual, was we were trying to attempt to see how current staffing was able to provide us with that support. And obviously we realized that our best intentions and our wish for that to happen, that we were also stretching the current staff there who were asked to cover classes. So I want people to think about that in its context, that even with the best plan, that the existing absences add another layer of complexity to this conversation as well. So when we talk about what we have tried to do in an attempt to outreach and finding individuals who are qualified to provide support, supervisorial support in our buildings, we did send out and we pushed out a request for those in the community that if they were interested in becoming a substitute and providing a level of supervision for us, we provided a link where they're able to do that. There is a number of qualifying or prerequisites that individuals have to go through in order to make that happen, to make that effective. Dr. Lahada and his team and others at central office really looked at more closely our current staffing and tried to see where we could pull individuals, which was really an exercise in futility because we already knew how challenging it was, but we did not want to leave any stone unturned. And we went back to that spreadsheet and said, are there people that we missed in the preliminary review that we could shift, that we overlooked? And in itself, that played out the same way in which we thought. It was just really literally impossible to find any individuals with their existing schedule to do that, or to at least in any meaningful way to support that. So one of the things too that we have to talk about is we try to think about, well, are there other staff members in other buildings that we can bring over? The challenge was that those buildings onto themselves were also on thin ice and could not afford to transfer or to pass over any additional staff, because that then would impact their ability to run effectively, run safely, and cause a functional closure. And then we reached out to our BEC colleagues and sat down with the president of BEC, Mrs. Jarvis, and tried to come up with language that would allow some of our aides to provide supervision in the classroom. Now, some of our aides do provide that, they're able to do that, but there's language that really limits the number of either periods or hours that they can do that level of supervision. So we sat down and they were more than willing, and I want to thank them for sitting down with us and problem solving and more than willing to say, what could we do? And that's the type of partnership that makes things work really well when two people come in and say, what can we do to make this work? Versus here's all the things I need. So I appreciate their leadership in that process. So that was a good sign in terms of being able to do that. Now, the flip side of that was it was extremely difficult because once we identified that, and Ms. Jarvis and I were half-heartedly joking, and when we said, you know, the problem is not me sitting down and coming to an agreement with allowing some of our aides to provide additional hours of supervision. It is whether or not we have enough aides on the ground who can do that. And if you look at our legislative meetings on any given Tuesday, that you see a number of aides that are resigning every single month and a large number who resigned as a result of COVID-19. So those numbers were small unto itself. We identified a small number of individuals who were able to do that. Then we had to seek their interest in order for them to do that. And out of that process, we found one individual who was willing and had the flexibility in order to do that. So we added that to the column of, at least that's one person we can try to help us with that process. Ms. Jackson had re-engaged a number of our third-party partners around Kelly Educational Services, Delta T, and General Healthcare Resources. I had a parent who reached out to me and said, Dr. Marseille, what can I do? I'm with Delta T. If there's anything that I can do, and if you need me to push this up to the CEO, I can do that. I thanked her for her willingness to do that, shared with her that we did. We do have a collaborative partnership with Delta T who provides us supports, but absolutely, I would not say no to her sitting down with upper level management and advocating on our behalf. And I'm grateful for that parent who contacted and lent her service. So currently right now we have 4 to 5 individuals in the pipeline who are going through the prerequisite process with respects to making sure that they get all the appropriate paperwork and certification and checks and balances that was needed. There was this really conversation about volunteers, and we looked through that, and you know, the idea about bringing in volunteers without specific prerequisite is extremely alarming to me and challenging. So we really wanted to go through those agencies that would provide us with that opportunity. And I'll answer a couple questions later in the meeting where a parent did ask about certification. What does that look like? And I can do that process. So those are some of the outreach that we have tried to do in order to do that. The other challenge as well is making sure that we have the technology infrastructure in order to do that, and the bandwidth that is going to be needed as you have 100+ students who are sitting inside the building and also on Google Classroom as well, and the increased bandwidth that is needed. So we did look into purchasing and have purchased a couple of high density access points that we will be installing all dependent on how we move forward with staffing. With respects to that, we are going to need headphones or microphones to eliminate audio feedback in the classroom. Like I said before, if you can imagine multiple students being instructed by multiple teachers on their screen, all under one classroom or under one roof, and the challenge that will come in terms of how they engage if there are 3 to 4 different lessons going on. And I guess you can talk about how we can group them strategically in other places, but not all English classes are the same, and they're not always on page 18 on March or page 118 on March 19th or March 17th, whatever that may look like. So we're working out those, and we're very happy to know that the access points are there. We're getting, trying to get some pricing for headphones for those individuals that may not have those headphones that will help in terms of eliminating feedback. So we may have to provide that to our students and hope that we're not resupplying it every single time, because students are losing it or they become damaged. The operational needs, and talking to Mr. Teasdale and his team, that one of the things that we have to do as well, if we move into these large spaces that I had shared earlier, then this is my last slide, and Dr. Lahada will take over and kind of walk you through what those options look like throughout the building. So if we are in Stretton Hall, there are going to be additional air purifiers that we're going to need to install there. In that process, obviously, we're going to make sure that with large number of students, because now we're moving from the possibility of having 9 to 14 kids in the classroom for less than 50 minutes to now moving to having large group of students for several hours in one large location. Not the way in which our health and safety plan was designed. The only thing that remotely comes close to that is the 30 minutes in which our students have lunch. And those numbers, and maybe Dr. Lahada can speak to that in terms of what those numbers are, but they're only there for 30 minutes and not necessarily for back-to-back 4 periods in a row, in the event that they were one of those students that had staff members who were not present. And we'll make sure that we have the appropriate hand sanitizing and identify a schedule to make sure that we're cleaning those large spaces, as you can imagine, over 100 some odd students. And that doesn't include if there are the historical double-digit traditional absences, well, those students also would have to be moved to those locations as well. So that number could balloon significantly larger than the 116 or the 114 you saw in the previous slides. So with that, I'll pass over the rest of the presentation. Dr. Lahada, you can talk to this, and just let me know when you'd like me to progress the slide through, and I'll do that for you if that's okay.
Yep, that sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Marseille. So the next portion that I'm going to take you through is just the different options and the different areas that we can house students in a large area to use as the least amount of staff and personnel as possible to supervise them. So the first area, option A, is Stretton Hall. As you can see in the picture, there were signs already where the signs for kids to be socially distanced. When facilities looked at the number of students that could fit socially distanced in Stretton Hall, we can fit about 105 students in that area. And if you remember the data that Dr. Marseille showed you, there are some periods that have way over the 105 students. There was one period that had 106 students, one that had 125. So and again, I want to be clear that this is just talking about the the teachers that are on leave right now and accommodating those classrooms in an area where they can be supervised and they can be taught remotely by those teachers. So if we were to use Stretton Hall, we would definitely need noise canceling headphones with microphones for each one of those students. And you're talking about multiple classrooms with over 100 students in each period. We would need at least 6 adults to properly monitor Stretton Hall to make sure that students are social distanced, not sitting too close to each other, and making sure they're getting their work done. We would need high density access points, new wiring, and a high capacity switch for the large groups so they can comfortably access the internet and do their work on their laptops. And as Dr. Marseille mentioned earlier, we would need 6 air purifiers to accommodate this study hall for students in Stretton Hall. So again, this is just for those 15 teachers that are on leave. When you add the additional teachers that are absent, randomly absent, then you add more students and more classes to the mix. So that's option A for Stretton Hall. The next option is to use the little theater. We actually use the little theater right now to do study halls, to give students more space and teachers more access to social distance to supervise students to do study hall. So we're already using the little theater, but if it became a need for us to use the little theater, we can also use this to condense the classrooms for the teachers that are on leave as well into the little theater. Now, we wouldn't need as many, no additional technology, which is a good thing, but we would still need air purifiers installed in the little theater, the same noise canceling headphones with microphones for the students, same amount of adults to supervise the little theater, and the seating capacity in the little theater is about 80 students. So you can fit less classrooms in there, but we can still use that as an option. The cafeteria, we can use the cafeteria when it's not being used for the lunch periods, the 3 lunch periods that go on during the day. And if we can do that in combination with the little theater and Stretton Hall, we can fit, if you go to the next slide, Doc, we can fit about 120 students in the big cafeteria where the students are already socially distanced for lunch. And I think it's actually 120 overall, because I think it's about 100 in the big cafeteria that we can fit in there comfortably. And we can add about another 15 or 20 students in the senior cafeteria socially distanced as well, which amounts to about 120 students altogether. So that is another option for us to use to house students in a large area to supervise them as well. And as I mentioned earlier, the cafeteria can be utilized in the periods when it's not being used for the 3 lunches, when the 3 lunches are not in service. You know, and again, the needs are the same for the cafeteria. We don't need air purifiers because they already have them inside the cafeteria. We would just need the amount of adults to supervise, and again, the noise canceling headphones for the scholars while they're doing their work. Because again, as Dr. Marseille mentioned, and I failed to mention this in all the other areas, is even if we do, you know, try our best, and I don't know how we would do this on a daily basis and by periods, even if we do try to space out the students by department, let's say, like, you know, if you're in English 1 for this class, you know, try to sit socially distanced in this area. If you're in science, try to sit in this area. So that you get the minimal least amount of feedback possible from listening to other students, and hopefully the noise canceling headphones do their job. But you know, that would be one of the highest needs that we have, is to make sure that we have those noise canceling headphones for our scholars. And then this is what we normally do before when we first started hybrid, and we would then use the Stretton Hall as the last resort, is that we would use the existing classrooms, and then we would have our own teaching staff, our own teachers take turns covering those classrooms. So we would use an existing classroom and students would be set up by individual class, and then we would need more teachers of our own besides any substitutes that we would give, which is really low at this point. We will use our own teachers to cover those classrooms when students are in those classrooms being remotely taught by their teacher. And of course, same thing, they would need their noise canceling, headphones, and be able to get on their Google Meet classes and their laptops to go through their instruction for the day.
Dr. Lahada, it's my understanding, I thought that option D was trying to, in addition to that, was trying to find classrooms that were not at full capacity.
Oh, yes. So, right. So we would, so that, I'm sorry, that I forgot about that part. So that was the other option that was presented, where, as Dr. Marseille mentioned earlier, we do have a capacity of students that we would like to keep in a classroom, which is 12. The number is 12. But there are some classrooms that have, some have 6 students, some have 3. And the discussion was for option D was to combine those classrooms and put them together into one classroom to minimize the amount of teachers that we would need in the classroom. But again, you're mixing, other students from other classes into one class. And it might be, you can do the best that you can, again, to try to group them by departments. But as Dr. Marseille mentioned earlier, there's still students that they could be in an English class, but they would be taught 2 different things during the same time period. So that is the other option. I failed to say that, Doc. Thank you for reminding me.
Oh, thank you. And I think that, Dr. Lahara, I think that's it for our presentation.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Mr.
Fishbein,
if you'd like to.
I will see if there are any board members who have questions. If you do, please raise your hand, board members. I saw Mr. Cohen first, but I'm going to call on Ms. Haywood first because I neglected to call on her last time. So you can go first.
Mr. Fishbein. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Marseille and Dr. Lahada. I really appreciate all of the attention and time I'm sure it took to put these options together. It's not easy. You just really need bodies, and you can't manufacture bodies. So I understand that we're trying to figure out how we can utilize the space that we have. I just wanted to be clear. We're really talking about really almost on a daily basis being able to accommodate 25 teachers, right? Because we're talking about the 15 that are out of the building right now and the additional 10 that we anticipate being sick or out of the building on average on a daily basis, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so with that, do we have the space to be able to accommodate those 25 teachers by pushing in for option D into multiple classrooms?
Yeah, that's definitely an option, Julie. And again, it's what we did when we came back to hybrid those 2 days. Mm-hmm. But again, it's at the cost of, and I'll just be frank, it's at the cost of our own teachers that are already there in the building, having to give up their prep time or whatever, to cover those classes. And on a daily basis, you have teachers covering some of them, multiple times. Mm-hmm. And it just gets exhausting. So that's why we came up with those other options to try to minimize that and have the students in a large space. But, again, as you mentioned, it's tough with the personnel and not having the bodies that we need. And I'm sorry to say it like that, but not having the substitutes to really cover those classes or the monitors to be in those classes. So we have to dip into our own well, which is our own teachers that are already there.
Okay. And for option A and B, where we're talking about additional wiring and air purifiers, in particular, when we talk about kind of infrastructure changes with respect to wiring, If that were done for option A or B, do we anticipate utilization of that technology in those spaces going forward?
Yeah, we would have to. Now that they're hardwired, I can't see how we not take advantage of them being there. Like everything else, we're in the conversation about, Dr. Smith provided her team with an excellent book by Mr. Galloway, post-COVID. And it just really spoke to what are those, if you can, during this pandemic, what are those opportunities that exist for us that COVID has hyper accelerated? Mm-hmm. And what that is about this virtual experience. So once we put those, and all the air purifiers we put in our building, it just increases the quality of the experience now. We never would have thought about doing that, at least not at that pace and veracity. So those wiring mechanisms, as they are installed, especially in Stretton Hall, because that's, the high school is a very old building, mm-hmm. Is going to significantly improve that experience even post COVID-19.
Okay, those were the only questions I had, Mr. Fishbein. Thank you.
Oh, I was on mute. Thank you, Ms. Haywood. Next, Mr. Cohen.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. I assume the presentation is reflective of the current situation we're in, and I ask that for verification purposes, but also more so looking forward in terms of teachers that might be vaccinated using the J&J vaccine and or through other means, and looking towards the future, say after spring break ends. Are we looking at plans that reflect what I hope will be more teachers returning to the classrooms and being available from our existing staff?
I will talk about that briefly in my superintendent's report, but the short answer is I can only hope that based on our data that we would get a significant number of staff members returning to the building post April 5th.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
That would really significantly help this process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Next up, Charles Burdell-Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein, and thank you, Dr. Marseille and Dr. Lahara, for the presentation. I have just one question. It's regarding bandwidth and network upgrades at the high school. Notwithstanding what we're experiencing now with COVID-19, but just thinking in regards to, just being more technologically flexible for the future, are we considering these upgrades to the network at Cheltenham High and other schools? And do we have any grant funding that can support us in doing so? I'm just wondering, I think that this is a time for us to consider those types of things. And I know we did a lot of work. Mr. Barone updated us that we've done a lot of work really over the last year in upgrading bandwidth across the district. And I just want to understand if those plans are going to continue.
Mr. Barone is putting or has been working on a 5-year technology plan with regards to infrastructure upgrades, just like Mr. Teasdale, who provides us reports on School Dude in terms of the shelf life of products and when we can expect that we might need to recycle metaphorically in terms of replacement. We are keenly aware of what that looks like and those upgrades. Our ESSER $2 that we are in receipt of and the upcoming ESSER $3. Mr. Fishbein is going to keep his ears to the ground to wait to see where that is going to come. We're excited about that as well. So to answer your question, that currently in the pipeline, Mr. Barone has requested some of those ESSER $2 be allocated to infrastructure and upgrades and replacement of technology that is on its last leg, which hate to say this, but it's not that there's an opportune time during this crisis, but because the ESSER dollars are coming through, that helps us significantly as a district. Because if we did not have those dollars, we would be struggling to figure out how do we upgrade, for example, all of the smart board technology at our elementary schools, especially at either Wyncote or Glenside, as we think through that process. So Mr. Barone has put a plan together. He has made that request. And we can't give him all of the dollars that he's asking for, but we can give him enough to make a significant impact and give us a long shelf life so that the district doesn't have to think about at least that particular building or particular infrastructure for a couple more years.
Yeah, that's good to know. I think it's important for the community as well. You know, I know we have a lot of new buildings, but as we all know and understand, information technology is steadily evolving, and with it is the need to evolve our hardware in order to stay current. And with the load that we have now on our current network, it's very evident that we are, you know, in need of some upgrades. So I'm happy to hear that we have a plan, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that soon.
Thank you, Mr. Burdell Williams. Jennifer Lohman, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. Thank you, Dr. Marce and Dr. Lahara, for your presentation. I have just a couple of questions, which I was wondering, do you have a sense that if say you chose what the approximate cost might be for outfitting Stratton Hall to accommodate the 105 students with the airport purifiers and all of that, how much that would cost?
We don't have that cost. There are Mr. Teasdale's getting that price with regards to the wiring. We do have additional purifiers in our storage facility that we can use immediately. But I would recommend that after we use those, that we order another stockpile in the event something happens. So those were really just there as an opportunity so that if we had a number of failures in the system, which we did, we don't believe we will, but you always want to make sure you have an additional number of supplies in your stock room. So I believe we have the air purifiers on hand. It is about the technical wiring. And always, as you know, the challenge is that once you start talking about wiring of old buildings, it's not as simple as one would think. So Mr. Teasdale did have someone out there. We were hoping to have that information to you by tonight, but we, it's approximately, there you go. It's approximately $1,400 a unit. Okay. So we have some pricing in terms of that. Okay. But once we do use that, what we have in stock, we are planning to purchase some more because we don't want to be flat-footed in the event that we have a number that go down, which we don't anticipate, but you always have enough to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay. Okay. So it would be the wiring, the air purifiers, the hand sanitizer, the technological upgrades. So there's definitely certain costs, right, associated. Yes. The headsets we were looking at are roughly between $15 to $25 per student. If we're able to do that, we'd have to calculate it per student. We don't know which students will have it, which students will say they don't need it. So you always have to do that. And then you have to order extra in the event that a student walks into the building on one particular day and says that I don't have it. And in addition, Mr. Teasdale is telling me that some of those wiring upgrades will help us in the long run in the future anyway. So it's not just about the air purifiers as well. So we'll see if we can, depending on the cost, if we do have additional ESSER dollars, we might ask them to do a little bit more, but it will support us very similar to Mr. Burdell Williams in the long run for the district.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's helpful. I'm just trying to get a sense of the cost, because the next question sort of is, you know, I know we have an estimate of the number of students we think might return to the building. Do we have kind of a more recent update on how many kids we might think might return to the building? And I ask this because, you know, having heard from kids who were in the building for the, you know, couple of days that the high school was open, there were actually, it seemed to them at least, there were fewer kids in the building than even they thought were going to be in the building, like kids who said they were going to come in, didn't come in. And so I'm also trying to just figure out the cost benefit of I'm very much in favor of opening the high school, by the way. I'm just trying to get the cost benefit kind of sense of, you know, how many kids do we really have who are committed to coming into the building? You know, do we know?
We do know. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I think Dr. Lahada did share, because when we were open for the high school and more so for the other schools, that the principals do provide me a daily attendance check in terms of the average number of kids who are there for in-person instruction. So I could defer to Dr. Lahada if he has a number off the top of his head in terms of the percentage of those students who were actually coming for in-person instruction. We have a roughly 50-50, but in terms of those 2 days, I don't have those numbers readily available right now. Okay. I did have them, but I had them like 30 days ago.
Okay, that's fine.
File, but I don't have them right now.
Yeah, no, I know you have a lot of numbers floating around. That for me, that's just the calculus that I'm sort of interested in, because as much as I would love to see this high school open, at some point, I feel like there may be like a tipping point where the cost to opening it might not outweigh the benefit to the number of students we could actually bring in. So that's just where I'm at that point. That's all I have. Thank you.
I'd have to see what those numbers are before thinking about that process. I did not sense it on a large scale, though I would agree that there were some classrooms the first 2 days. For some reason, in my mind, I thought there would be more kids, but I didn't have the actual breakdown in terms of that. And I don't know if that was because it was the first couple of days, because we really did not. I mean, it's hard because you did not put enough time in to make a really informative, this is what it looks like. We didn't even have cohort B in the building. We only had cohort A in that process, very similar to what Ms. Robinson presented. At least some of those buildings have had 30 days and they're able to transition and they're seeing how things are working really well and people are adapting and the students are saying that and the staff members are saying that. Very difficult when you've only had 2 days in.
I know, I appreciate that. I do. All right, well, that's all I had. Those were sort of things I've been thinking about in terms of high school reopening, and I know you happen to, so.
But I think to Mr. Cohen's point later, and I'll talk about this, is that, you know, with these, as we draw closer to this warmer weather, as we draw closer to additional mitigation opportunities, that I don't think that will be a challenge in terms of people wanting to come back to the building, because there's already people expressing interest, both from parents and guardians and adults about coming back as they are more confident about what they're hearing and what they are seeing.
Thank you, Ms. Lohman. Ms. Haywood, I see your hands up again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Fishbein. I think the last question I think that Ms. Lohman asked kind of triggered something for me, Dr. Marseille. Do we have any sense of the timing of kind of making any recommendations with these 4 options, given the J&J vaccine administration for teachers, given what it may take in upfront time and cost to do wiring in any part of the building? You know, given some other factors, do we have a sense of when we would make a decision one way or the other, a recommendation one way or the other with respect to the 4 options to pursue.
We have Stretton Hall that currently is ready to go in terms of some of that process. Even though it does not accommodate that, we can put some things up. We're hopeful that post-spring break, we can have individuals begin to come back into the building. But at the end of the day, we believe that the J&J vaccination will significantly hyper-accelerate the opportunity to come back. If indeed individuals remain committed to the notion that, hey, if I can get a vaccine, I'd be more than willing to come back. If that holds firm, then we are in a very good place as a district. And considering that, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, our date of the staff members who are scheduled for that J&J vaccination, and the possibility that by the end of this month, we'll have another second round that's expected to come in terms of staff. So I'm really optimistic that sometime after, and hopeful that sometime after spring break, we can begin putting together a schedule with our students and staff returning.
That's great. That's definitely great news. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haywood. I see no further board questions. I have an announcement, thanks to Mr. Kaufman. The Cheltenham Panthers boys basketball team won over Methacton 45-43, so they go on to the next round of districts. Congratulations to Coach Flory and the team. And we can move on to the next item in our agenda, which is the Solicitors Report.
Good evening. I would like to report that earlier this week, President Biden signed an executive order that will allow the Department of Education to review the new Title IX regulations to determine whether they are consistent with the policies of the new administration. We will advise the district whether this requires any changes to the recently adopted Title IX policies at Cheltenham. As you may recall, they underwent significant revision earlier this year. With extensive training, and it looks like we may need to be revisiting it already. As for sunshine announcements, there were no executive sessions since the February board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Roos. The next item on the agenda is the President's Report, and I'll ask for approval of the Treasurer's Report. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Chris Pender. Second, Bill England.
First, Chris Pender, second, Bill England. Do I hear any board discussion? Call the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Hearing none, the Treasurer's Report is approved. Next item on the agenda is the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, Mr. England.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. I have a brief report to share business with the MCIU, starting with highlights from our last meeting, which was held on February 24th. The Executive Cabinet is meeting with the leadership teams of our Act 93, CTC, and support staff groups to discuss agreements that are scheduled to expire on June 30th, 2021. Details of the proposed agreements will be shared in an executive session in March. There was an executive session in February that I participated in with the board leadership, and all is moving in the right direction. The MCIU continues to host twice weekly meetings between superintendents in Montgomery County with Commissioner Arkush, the Public Health Department, representative of Children's Hospitals. These are the ongoing meetings that have been going on nearly for a year now that revolve around COVID-19 and all things that relate to that. Thankfully, we're hearing more about vaccines these days. That is becoming more dominant in some of the discussion. Human resource updates. We have hired 10 new employees at MCIU. There were 3 retirements this past month. MCIU approved a number of contracted service agreements to support the following initiatives: Family Learning Conference, the Path to Graduation, P2G, AAC Talks 2021, Pennsylvania Department of Education Annual Conference, and various trainings and services provided by MCIU. General operations, the board approved or ratified payments in the amount of $13,548,590.45 for bills due in January 21 and $1,679,130.30 for February. The board approved the Office of Student Services budget and fee schedule in the amount of $27,313,180 for the period of July 1 through June 30, 2022. The budget represents the cost of providing special education services to school districts across Montgomery County. Approved of the budget of business services, the transportation budget in the amount of $10,092,090 for the period of July 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. This budget reflects the cost of providing transportation through contracted services for students based at local districts' request. We approved the Office of Business Services Facilities budget in the amount of $3,167,065, again for the period July 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. This budget includes the cost to operate the Early Learning Academy in Norriton, MCIU's main facility and conference center, and for security services. The board approved an in-kind waiver request for the Head Start program in the Office of Early Learning Education. The waiver request applies to the current period, June 1st, 2020 through May 31st, 2021, grant year, and is a direct result of COVID-19 pandemic. The board also approved a request for carryover funds in the amount of $293,116 for the Head Start program in the Office of Early Learning. The carryover request applies also to the period of June 1st, 2020 through May 31st, 2021. It's an odd but grant year, different than most of the others that we have. And this is also a result of the effects of the pandemic and how we have been able to operate our Head Start classrooms. We approved the budget revision for Safe Schools budget in the amount of $36,035 for the period of July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021, again impacted by the pandemic. MCIU board approved entering into a participation agreement with the Chester County Intermediate Unit Joint Purchasing Consortium to participate in the Apple bid program. So it's likely that school districts will have options for Apple computers going forward. I attended the Head Start Policy Council meeting on Wednesday, February 17th, which was a Zoom meeting. Head Start program now has 4 programs operating in person. The remainder are still virtual. 2 are at the Early Learning Academy and 1 in Ambler, and the last one is in Lansdale. The approval of the Head Start financial at the Policy Council meeting, which consists of Head Start staff and parents. The Policy Council approved the Head Start financial report grant for February 2021, approved the carryover budget and application that the board subsequently acted upon, approved the non-federal share waiver. The share waiver is attached to the Head Start contracts that come from Washington, D.C., and they require local Head Starts to provide an in-kind match to the federal dollars that are spent. And in this current year, because of the pandemic and the fact that we have not had opportunities for people to be in classrooms or for the collection of products and donations, we have asked for a waiver for approximately $300,000, which represents 30% of the Head Start in-kind budget contribution. We have a total of 235 students in 450 slots, but this is considered to be 100% enrollment right now because of COVID and the restrictions we have in the centers that have opened. Our income categorically eligible is at 81%. Families whose income is 100 to 130% over poverty level is at 13%, and families beyond 130% represent 6% of the slots. Enrollment is currently reduced because of virtual learning and effect of COVID. Current Head Start waiting list is 36, of which 25 are income eligible and 11 are over income. Pardon me. The budget, sorry, this lined up funny on my page. The budget for this year was $4,018,891. We have spent or encumbered $3,731,748.50, leaving a remaining balance of $287,142. Upcoming information on Wednesday, March 17th at 3:30 will be the next MCIU Head Start Policy Council meeting via Zoom. On Wednesday, March 24th is our monthly MCIU board meeting. We will have an executive session this month and will be held virtually and will continue to be so until further notice. Lastly, on Thursday, April 8th, the Pennsylvania Association of Intermediate Units is hosting its virtual Day on the Hill. It's a day of advocacy for IUs to meet with representatives and senators and talk about education policy, very similar to what PSBA will be doing in the coming time. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. England. Next on the agenda is the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology report by Mr. Burdell Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. The Eastern Center for Arts and Technology Joint Operating Committee met in February on February 10th. And as always is the tradition with the Joint Operating Committee, we first heard from the President's report regarding a number of items relative to student success, which is not just the goal of Eastern Center for Arts and Technology, but also that of all public school districts and across the Commonwealth. So first, there was a very important articulation agreement that we voted on and approved. That articulation agreement is with the Orleans Technical College, where students can potentially earn 8.5 articulation credits towards the technical college's air conditioning, refrigeration, and heating major, while also potentially earning 8.5 credits toward the carpentry major as well. This articulation agreement will allow a savings of $534 per credit for students who meet all of the established admissions criteria, which could potentially save an overall $4,500 for a 6-month program at the Orleans Technical College, which is, again, that's an amazing benefit for the students to be able to finish their time at Eastern and then have a if you will, a bonus opportunity available for them, not just, for folks who have, aspirations of going and getting advanced degrees and moving on to college settings, but also those who want to continue with their technical knowledge. This is a great opportunity for them. In addition, we heard an update on the Congress Buttonstock Youth Exchange Program, where all 4 of the students who applied for the Youth Exchange Program were selected for an interview that is coming very, very soon. Those finalists are Erica Layson from Abington Senior High, Thomas Mustard from Springfield Township, and our own Kayla Marshall from Cheltenham High, and Matthew Wiggins from Abington Senior High. Just to, for the community's enlightenment, this particular program is an exchange program that will allow them an opportunity to spend, I believe, a half year over in Germany in essentially a work study program and in the field of their interest. Again, a great opportunity, and again, good luck to the semifinalists. We also heard an excellent update for one of Eastern's previous students of the month, Mr. Greg DeFestano from Abington Senior High. He has been selected by the Pennsylvania Department of Education to be put forth to the U.S. Career and Technical Presidential Scholar Program. Greg was publicly recognized by the Pennsylvania Association of Career and Technical Administrators on February 18th. And again, this is an extremely high honor. Again, one that does not, again, just fall into the lap of any one student in particular. So again, congratulations to Greg on his accomplishments, and clearly for the staff at Eastern Center for Arts and Technology for supporting him. We heard more about the Black History Month graduate spotlights, of which there were 3. I did share at our last legislative meeting in February that Miss Alyssa Johnson, who was a 2019 construction program graduate from Eastern Center for Arts and Technology, as well as a 2019 graduate of Cheltenham High School, was recognized for her amazing accomplishments post-graduate. And again, excited about her experience and that of Mr. Jameer Davis and Mr. Fred Fox, who are also, again, supporting Black History Month efforts and making Black history every day in areas where there had been little to no representation in the past. So again, very proud of them. We were happy to hear that practical nursing class number 150 graduated on January 28th. This was a virtual graduation, as all of the graduations have been since they started back up last summer. Excuse me, as all of the practical nursing graduations have been since they started up last summer. And we also heard an update about I expect to hear a little bit more tomorrow, actually, but our March 7th virtual open house. This was the first, very widely publicized virtual open house for Eastern Center for Arts and Technology, which is typically an opportunity where students from all around can come and understand all about the programs happening at Eastern's, which is an amazing experience to be able to see the facility and all of the various programs and to interact with the teachers and administrators there. But I'm really excited that the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology was able to offer that opportunity virtually. Hopefully it garners the same amount of interest as the in-person open houses have, and looking forward to more of those in the future. So Joint Operating Committee moved on to approve financial reports. We then also moved on to another important aspect of the student experience, which is honoring the Student of the Month, Mr. William Clanderman. And again, the Student of the Month, just to reflect, is an award that's sponsored by Eastern's faculty, the Joint Operating Committee, and the Willow Grove Rotary Club to highlight student success, excellence, and service. Only 10 students each year are selected for this honor. And congratulations to William. William was chosen by his HVAC instructor, Mr. Brian Jacoby, to participate in Skills USA Career and Technical Student Orientations, going back to November 2020, where he then earned the Skills USA Framework Certification and the Statesman Assessment Award. The Framework Certification is an e-learning module where the participants were able to learn about Skills USA and how it ensures the development of world-class workers. The Statesman Assessment is presented to members who demonstrate Skills USA knowledge and civic awareness, which I thought was extremely amazing, because you think about the experience in career and technical education, and it sounds very hands-on, and again, very much so had been previously viewed as a quote-unquote alternative to furthering education. But I like that this particular award really reflects on the positive nature of civic awareness, and that the importance of that regardless of your particular career path. So again, very excited for William's accomplishments. William is also a member of the baseball team and golf team at Lower Moreland High School, and he also earned the rank outside of school, as an Eagle Scout. He enjoys working with his hands and volunteers locally. And again, he spends part of his time at a local, as a local electrician's assistant, where he is learning the electrical trade. He's currently assisting electricians and really applies his strong problem-solving skills to help out there. His plans are to move on to the Penn College of Technology and ultimately start his own HVAC business. Moving on and touching on one of my previous points regarding the school to career initiatives, we heard from Haley Granacher, which is Eastern's new school to career coordinator, where she provided an amazing overview of all of the efforts that Eastern is pushing forward to provide paid co-op work experiences, college credits through articulation agreements, summer work opportunities, employer visits and tours, and guest speakers, as a way to truly encourage and enhance the school to career pipeline and the role that Eastern Center for Arts and Technology plays in that school to career pipeline. Previous to these efforts, a lot of these school to career initiatives were very, let me just say, they were very relationship based. And this is more of a programmatic approach. And I'm very excited, as are the majority of our Joint Operating Committee, about this new initiative and what it will bring in terms of providing school to career experiences for students from the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology. One additional item was also that the summer cosmetology program will be offered. Last year, that was a big struggle given the challenges with COVID-19 around the summer. But there will be 144 hours of instruction over the summer, as well as an additional 60 hours in August. That will help students toward their goal of achieving the 1,250 hours necessary for obtaining their cosmetology license in Pennsylvania. Two other very important items that we reviewed at the Joint Operating Committee. One was the approval of Eastern's plan to implement weekly COVID-19 antigen testing through CHOPS program, better known as ACIT, which is Assisting Childhood Education through Increased Testing. Currently, that program is being administered at the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology by one nurse, one of the school nurses, and also the practical nursing coordinator. Again, a great step in the right direction toward creating, more sustainable policies and practices that will provide a more safe school environment for all, not just students, but for students, administrators, and teachers. And then lastly, the Joint Operating Committee provided the administration of the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology with the approval for Eastern to be able to submit a waiver for students to skip the NOCTI assessment this year. The NOCTI assessment, for the knowledge of the public, is an annual assessment of skill, again, learned through career and technical education. And this is a state administered exam. And after this particular waiver has been submitted, we are looking forward to what the state will share in terms of acceptance or denial, for the information of the public. This particular exam was canceled last year due to COVID-19 in a very similar fashion as the PSSA and other Keystone exam was also canceled. But this year, because many of the career and technical programs across the state started with hybrid programs back in September, the process for this particular year involved the submission of a waiver. And that is something that, again, has currently been submitted to the state, and there is some information out there that we should be waiting to hear back soon. That is all of the update I have from our last meeting. The next meeting of the Joint Operating Committee is tomorrow, March 10th at 8 p.m., excuse me. And that is going to be via Zoom. The link to that Zoom meeting is available on the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology website, which is eastech.org. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burdell Williams. And next on the agenda is the Student Representatives Report. I know Lisa's here. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. So for Student Council on our Environmental and Sustainability Chair, we have been working with Dr. Mercé, Dr. Riley, currently working on creating a committee that will integrate environmental education in the elementary to middle school curriculums. Our chairs are also working on helping the district create a new environmental clause to create new guidelines for recycling practices. We are also currently working on a fundraiser to support a local organic greenhouse farm that is struggling right now. We are thinking of somehow combining this fundraiser with our mass drive idea with charity and dance and school spirit committees. For civics and community engagement, we are currently working on a student activism showcase where we are highlighting civically and socially active groups at CHS, and it will be held on March 21st at 6:30 p.m. and the whole school board is invited. We would like to also thank Ms. Haywood for reaching out to Senator Haywood and Representative Nelson on behalf of us. We are also currently working with Mercé about having a school board liaison on the board and is conversing with the rest of STUCO about how we want to see this implemented. For voter registration season coming up, we are currently waiting to see if CHS will return to hybrid before making any voter registration plans. For Dance and School Spirit team, we are continuing to post about our Mental Health Monday initiative with the help of Press Secretary Committee to try to grow awareness about the importance of mental health during this time. They are also currently working with Enviro and Charity on their fundraiser idea. And they're also talking about an attempt for a homecoming/spring fling thing. Since football season starts and is coming up, we might be hosting a virtual pep rally to raise our school spirit even during this time. For Charity Committee, they are currently working with Enviro and Dance and School Spirit about the fundraiser. And for STUCO overall, we are discussing how to make our meetings more accessible to our student body, whether it would be us going on Instagram Live or opening up our Google Meet calls to the whole student body, just as how school board meetings are transparent to the community. And that concludes my Student Council report. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great report, Lisa. We so appreciate all the work the students are doing. And as you kept saying, especially during this time. And all of the important work is incredibly necessary right now. And I'll speak on behalf of the board, appreciate all of the engagement by the students and in particular Student Council. Thank you for all of your hard work. Next on the agenda is the Superintendent's Report, Dr. Mercé.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. A couple items that I wanted to share. which is highlighted in my agenda topic. So I'll go through them, touched on a couple of them, or at least one of them, but I'll go into depth with that. As we celebrate Women's History Month, thanks for all of those opportunities that are being provided for our students in our community to recognize the contributions of women. But as I shared with our principals and administrators who feel the same way, that this in no way reflects the way in which we try to incorporate those accomplishments throughout our curriculum. It does a disservice just to think about the accomplishments of groups by one calendar month. But indeed, we will follow suit and do that, but we try to work throughout our curriculum to make sure people are adequately represented in their accomplishments to this country and to the world. The communications office is doing a great job in terms of the alumni who are being highlighted through their campaign. So we want to thank them for that as well. This came up earlier around conversations around the high school reopening, and I am really excited, and I did mean when Mr. Kaufman provided the opportunity to speak to some individuals in the media about how this J&J vaccine that has been put into the mix is really a game changer for us and for everyone in terms of a third layer of mitigation. So the district, along with districts in the Commonwealth, were tasked to look through their list of faculty and staff and those who are supporting the district, even as contracted staff, to seek their interest in receiving the single-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Myself, Dr. Horsey, Dr. Smith, with the tremendous support of the IU, who's been doing this, especially Mrs. Edling, giving her a shout out as she's juggling so many things right now, because she is responsible for supporting all of the districts in Montgomery County to make sure that the surveys were appropriately done, they were vetted and submitted back. So we're happy to report that all of our staff members and teachers and faculty and our contracted staff who participated in giving us information about their willingness to take the Johnson & Johnson. We received that information, we scrubbed it in terms of accuracy, and we're excited that all the individuals that indicated that they wanted the vaccine, we were able to provide them with that opportunity. MI will be sending out, I believe they said today, communication to those individuals via email confirming their vaccination date. So we do have a large number of individuals, from bus drivers to aides to paraprofessionals to administrators to teachers, contracted workers who will be, if they commit to this date, which they said they will, taking the vaccine on March 17th. As a result of what we anticipate and have seen, and without creating too much chaos, for lack of a better term, in terms of scheduling and the challenges that comes with vaccination, and that people are reacting to vaccines very differently. What we will move towards is that we want to let individuals know that we plan to move to an asynchronous model 2 days after the vaccination, so that it gives the large number of staff members the opportunity to hopefully get through some of those symptoms that we are seeing. Some individuals are fine, but others do have reactions, and we believe it's the prudent thing to do in order to make sure that we don't have this intermittent and daily interruption where we're notifying individuals either the night before or the morning around attendance when we know such a large number of our staff and employees are going to be vaccinated that Wednesday. But we are really happy for those individuals who said yes and their commitment to stick to that March 17th vaccination date, which plays a large role in our ability to hyper accelerate our opening of the high school back to our in-person instruction. The other exciting layer that we've added onto this, and we've been working on this, and I say we, it's really Dr. Horsey, Mrs. Dunlap, Ms. Jackson, and Mrs. Nab, who've been working with CHOP, and Mr. Bedell Williams made reference to this in his report for Eastern, and we're excited that we've been working behind the scenes wanting to bring rapid antigen testing to the district. Dr. Horsey and her team have been working with Maggie from CHOP. So we also want to thank Mr. Fishbein for really solidifying that connection for us and moving forward with that. And I know that people are thinking about this in terms of, well, the vaccine's here, but this is another layer that we want to provide. So training is going to take place tomorrow, and we anticipate that we're going to begin testing for, or given the option of our staff to get tested. And we're going to start in one building, see how that works over the next couple of weeks, and then begin to possibly expand that over the next couple of weeks in terms of how we're seeing it working. So we're really optimistic and really happy that we have this J&J vaccination that has come on board, that has helped us significantly, in addition to obviously the individuals who were part of that phase 1A, whether they were Moderna or Pfizer, moving closer to the 1B, and then this J&J. Then we have this rapid testing that we're going to provide our staff, I think adds a significant amount of layers to help individuals become much more comfortable in returning to our buildings. We also want to share with you an opportunity that our board is extremely excited about. Mr. England and Mrs. Haywood have played a large role in terms of helping to create this opportunity and facilitating that. But on March 15th, this community has a rare opportunity. And I know there are other opportunities because these legislators make themselves available. We know some of them very well. Some of them are our neighbors. But this is an opportunity to bring them together and for them to share with the community exactly what their primary objectives are for public education and their legislative initiatives to support K through 12 public education. And it gives the community an opportunity to really have access and ask some of your questions. So we're really excited, and we want to fill up that Zoom room as much as possible for that. So March 15th, 7 o'clock to 8:30, we have Representative Madeline Dean, State Senator Art Haywood, State Representative Napoleon Nelson, and State Representative Benjamin Sanchez. And I have to say I am looking forward to speaking to Mr. Sanchez. I have not had an opportunity, my apologies, but I'm glad that he is joining us. In addition, we'll be joined by the superintendent, a colleague and friend of mine, who will be joining us, Dr. Fetcher, along with the board president, who will be engaged in this conversation as well. So please mark your date for that event, and we are pushing out communication through our channels. We're really happy to, and this has been posted on our website, but I wanted to share that with you, our COVID-19 dashboard that again members of Dr. Horsey's team, along with the communications office, have been working to put together. We wanted to provide a narrative that we think is very clear in terms of keeping our community engaged with respects to when we do have positive cases in our district. Yes, we send those letters letting the community know, but this is another form in which you can keep up to date as we are 30 days into this our in-person or hybrid, I should say, experience. So it's a great tool in terms of keeping track of where we are, and we have a number of ways in which you can look at the data. So I encourage you to periodically visit that, where we have a treasure trove of information with respects to COVID-19. And obviously, as everything continues to shift, we try to put that on our website. It's literally impossible. We will be communicating 2 or 3 times a day in terms of how often some of the guidance shifts, and then it shifts back. But this is our CSD reopening is a great opportunity for you to go and check out some of those items that we are trying desperately to keep ahead of and keep our community ahead of that as well. Some upcoming dates that we want to remind you of, and your participation in those. We continue to welcome participation in our committees. I've said this before, and I've said this, that is where the rich dialogue happens. Oftentimes, this formal process of legislative meetings is to go through the bureaucracy of it, but the conversations are really unpacked in those committee meetings. So we're hoping that people mark those on their calendars and join us. And obviously, we want to talk about that. The March 6th holiday schedule is going to, that day is going to look different. So please check out the website in terms of early dismissal. Spring break right around the corner. Can't believe it. And also on April 6th, we are going to do something different, because we are going to talk, and we shared this at our last finance meeting, and I shared that in my letter to the community last week, that we are going to have a conversation. We've had conversations, but want the community to attend. And we're going to flip the meeting around. Usually facilities goes first to make sure that we don't lose a lot of our Zoomies as a result of the finance meeting happen later. We're going to have our finance committee meeting first and give the opportunity to talk about some of the ways in which we're looking to think about our ongoing structural deficit and our challenges. As you can imagine, even though there are some savings, and we shared that in previous finance meetings with regards to COVID-19, there's also additional expenditures as well. And one of them is really the ballooning of cyber charter school costs, and how that's almost added close to $2 million to our bottom line. There are ways in which we are working to recruit those families back who made that decision a year ago. Marks when I sent that communication to our families thinking we're going to close for a couple of days while we clean our buildings, and unbeknownst to the whole world, that we would still be here, but at least I remember Mr. Fishbach's point, there is at least light at the end of the tunnel in terms of all the mitigation factors that are in play, and individuals who are abiding by them and willing to participate. So please, April 6th, an important date for our finance. Also that May date as well. And of course that June date when we present a final budget. But we're going to be working on that throughout the next 2 sessions and encourage individuals to attend. And then I want to remind the community that at our last legislative meeting, we talked about the shift that's going to take place with our board meetings, and that the board agreed that we were going to have a very different format that would allow the board to participate in person. More information will be forthcoming to give the community a sense of how that April meeting is going to work. You'll still be able to Zoom, still be able to stream, but we will have the opportunity where board members will have the option to participate in person. And we're probably our first attempt at this will probably take place at Cedarbrook, and we'll confirm that and give individuals enough time to plan accordingly. And with that, Mr. Fishbein, that is the end of my report.
Thank you, Dr. Marseille. We have reached the time in the meeting for public comments on agenda items only. If you have a comment or question about an agenda item, you can raise your hand in the participant section of the meeting, and I see one raised hand so far. And or if you're watching by streaming, you can send an email to csdboardmeetingcomments@cheltenham.org. If you intend to raise your hand, please ensure that your Zoom screen name is your name and where you live in the township. And I have for the public up on the screen the parameters for questions at this time in the meeting. And I see Mr. England on the board has a question, and I assume that's a question for Dr. Marseille based on his superintendent report.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. I wanted to just clarify something. The town hall, which we all hope people will join us for and encourage people to come out. This is an important evening talking about two critical issues. Ms. Haywood has really put this together. I've been along for the ride, and I just wanted to say that. This was her idea. She's worked hard on this. We've tried to bring in some of the other neighboring communities to be with us, and I just wanted to just recognize her for the time and the vision she's put into this. This is an exciting thing that school districts don't often get to do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. England, and I'll second that.
Thank you.
Yeah, the amount of effort and leadership and thought that went into planning this is hard to overstate, and it was all Ms. Haywood's was the driving force behind it. Thank you, Ms. Haywood. There is one raised hand, but the person whose hand is raised does not have where in the township they reside, and I will not call on that person unless and until she changes her screen name. Not seeing that change. Yeah, no, the hand went down. So, wait, there's one more. Wait, let's see. Can another board member scan the participants? I'm not seeing a raised hand. Oh, there, it's gone. That's why. Okay. There are no public comments or questions on agenda items, so we can move to the next item on tonight's agenda. Oh, wait, I take that back. We should check the email, which I didn't do. So let's see if there are any emails.
Is Mr. Rose checking that, or?
Sure.
I don't believe so, Mr. Fishbein.
Yeah, no.
Mr. Fishbein, I'm sorry. I do see an email at 7:33 tonight addressed to CSD board meeting comments.
Okay. And that is on an agenda item. So Mr. Roos, if you want to read that.
I'm not seeing it in my feed.
That's okay. I'll read it. It's from Lisa Rittler from Glenside. She asks, first, Mr. Blackwell, thank you. Continue to do for our CHS athletes. With games beginning next week, when will decision be made about parents/fans be allowed to attend any home games, socially distanced / face mask, and following outdoor COVID guidelines? Thank you.
We do plan on allowing parents, whether it happens on the first game, that's the question mark, but our intent is to put communication that will provide guidance on how that is going to work for parent, community participation at the games.
Thank you, Ms. Rittler, for your question. And that concludes the public comment portion of this meeting. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of the January 12th, 2021 Legislative Board meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Ms. Lohman.
Second, Mr. Verdell Williams.
Do I have any board discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the January 12th, 2021 Legislative Board meeting minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing
Mr.
none.
Fishman, can I just make one comment?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to thank Ms. Harding for putting these minutes together. They have not been easy for the last few meetings where we've had motions and amendments to motions and seconds to motions and re-motions. So it's a lot to follow and a lot to get down. So I really wanted to thank her for putting those minutes together. I'm sure it's pretty tedious to do that. And to also thank Ms. Lohman. She's always the first reader of those minutes and always does a great and thorough job in that as well.
Thank you, Ms. Haywood. And I had not thought to call out the fine work of both of the individuals you mentioned, but there's another thing that made this month's even harder, which was collecting the emails that were to be incorporated into public comments because they weren't made verbally. And that she did with, that took a lot of effort, and they are there. And now part of the approved minutes, well, actually, we haven't yet fully voted. So were there any other comments to the board meeting minutes approval? Were there any nays? Hearing none, the board minutes are approved and they will be posted as approved. Thank you. We can move on to the next item in the agenda. Committee reports, financial affairs, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you. Finance Committee, the Financial Affairs Committee held a meeting on Tuesday, March 2nd via Zoom. Following roll call and approval of minutes, administration presented a review of the 2020-2021 budget. And everything looked in order. And if folks are interested, the slides are available, which has the rows of numbers. The next agenda item was a discussion of charter school tuition in the 2020-2021 year. That's the current year, as well as for the next budget. Charter school costs this year are expected to total around $2.5 million, which is over $1 million more than had been budgeted. Many districts are seeing this type of increase due to COVID-19. And for those unfamiliar, charter school costs are directly driven by individual members of the public who choose to enroll their student in a charter school, and that maps to a charge to the district. This number represents a sharp increase over historic charter school trends in Cheltenham. And I believe earlier this evening, during the superintendent's report, these numbers were alluded to. The board was then presented with a data analytics review, which included a series of charts comparing Cheltenham with neighboring districts, specifically Comparisons were made around district demographics, staffing ratios, special education enrollment, special education costs, and millage rates. And the purpose behind these charts is to help the board and administration make strategic decisions going forward and better understand how we compare with our peers, so that way we can be sure that we are benchmarked appropriately. The next agenda item was a review of the 2021-2022 budget. This budget, the presented budget reflects expenses of approximately $125 million, which is an increase of $3.8 million over the previous year's budget. This increase is largely driven by the previously mentioned charter school enrollment changes, as well, and therefore costs in the district, as well as an increase to debt service payments. Projected revenues netted approximately $119.5 million. It's important to highlight that this projected revenue assumes a 3% tax increase and a flatlining of the current year's state allocation. The governor's budget proposal was also mentioned, and if passed, would provide Cheltenham with approximately $3 million additional dollars in regular funding. There was an acknowledgement that state property tax relief funds, also known as the homestead exception, have not yet been included in this budget, as the state has not yet allocated funds to that program. I wanted to highlight this during this report because if the state does not allocate those funds, that would functionally represent an increase, a temporary, a one-year increase in tax bills, bluntly. The budget, so we hope that the state will allocate those funds. The budget presentation concluded with a reminder of the timeline of the budget process. That process will continue over the next several months and conclude in June. The next committee meeting will be held Tuesday, April 6th at 7 p.m. That concludes my report, but I believe I have action items for the board, unless I'm misremembering and that is included later. I believe we have to appoint the finance officer, or is that included in the administrative section?
That's in the administrative section.
Then that does truly conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Education Affairs.
Yes, so my report. On Tuesday, February 16th, the Educational Affairs Committee presented recommendations on class rank and course weighting for the high school. So I wanted to take some time just to break down, what this means to the district, or what it is for the district. So I have a series of questions and responses to those questions. What is class rank? Class rank is the mathematical summary of a student's academic record compared to those of other students in the class. It usually takes into account both the degree of difficulty of the courses a student has taken, known as course weight, for example, AP courses, honor, college prep, or regular courses, and the grade the student earns. The compilation of the course weighting and grades is converted into an overall score, also known as GPA, and the higher the GPA, the higher the student's class ranking. So why are we, Cheltenham School District, looking to change class rank? Class rank was once a major component in college admission decisions, but according to recent reports by the National Association for College Admission Counseling, the NACAC, more than half of all high schools across the country no longer report student rankings. Due to the tremendous difference in curricula and grading standards at different high schools, many admission officers at college have begun to discount the accuracy and importance of class rank as a factor in evaluating student admissions. Collaborative meetings were held at the high school. They involved Cheltenham High School counselors, department chairs, administration, and the director of secondary education. And the data that was provided during the presentation on February 16th, in addition to class rank that was decreased, a decreased priority for colleges and university, it is also being used less by our neighboring school districts. And what these administrators, counselors, department chairs, and the secondary education also found within the Cheltenham School District is that ranking students causes anxiety and stress. Some students are making course selection decisions to get a certain score, i.e. a higher course ranking, and are not choosing to take other courses that may be of greater interest for them. So the presentation itself contains other data that will be useful for the community. But let's talk about what's next. Dr. Smith, the Cheltenham School District Assistant Superintendent, her office is in the process of scheduling 2 public meetings to discuss the class rank recommendation, which is to eliminate the use of class ranking and the new proposed course weight changes for the 2021-2022 school year. The purpose of these meetings is to explain the proposed changes to class ranking and course weight and how these potential changes will enhance the learning experience for our high school scholars, and to answer questions from parents and other community members. One meeting will be held during the day, and the other meeting will be held in the evening via Zoom. Those meetings will be communicated in advance to give the community ample time to plan to attend those sessions. The next Educational Affairs meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, March 16th at 6:30 p.m. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Henry. Next is facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. The Facilities Committee met on Tuesday, March 2nd, just prior to the Finance Committee meeting. Mr. Teasdale spoke on building maintenance, CSD building and maintenance updates, as well as a school dude update. We started with the conversation regarding updates at the high school. The high school, being an older building, has an aging building automation system, amongst other things. There's work still continuing in order to resolve many of the issues with that building automation system. He also shared an update on a project that the district has been involved in for, I'd say, maybe almost 2 years now. This particular project refers to the stone soffit at the failed section of the failed metal rod, that held the stone soffit that was a part of the lintel on the front of Stratton Hall. Currently, the district is partnered with the Hui Engineering, who is working on a timeline for the proposed work and is expected to advertise this bid on March 16th, with the expected award of the contract to happen in May, work to begin on June 21st once our students and faculty are out of the building for summer, and also expecting to then finish the work in on July 30th, before students and teachers return to the building. We then heard about the CSD building and maintenance updates from across the district. There were very few, just regarding some pieces of equipment that need to be replaced across the district at Elkins Park, notably. And in addition to that, a small roof leak that was noted at Myers Elementary. Mr. Teasdale noted that although we had quite a bit of heavy snow this winter, that the one singular small roof leak at Myers Elementary School, that was a very, very optimistic approach that he had, and was very happy at the result of only having one leak this winter. He then carried on regarding some alternative options for the repair of a glycol pipe at Wyncote Elementary. So to give the community a little bit of background on that pipe, this particular glycol pipe is a part of the chiller cooling system, cooling tower at Wyncote Elementary School, which, unlike the rest of the new buildings in the district, is located some distance away from the main building, which requires that this glycol pipe, or series of glycol pipes, actually run underground between the main building and this cooling tower. There was one notable leak last year that was resolved, and again took the district and quite an amount of resources to be able to mitigate. And it was noted that there is another leak in that system that is currently being evaluated. As a part of, I guess, the foresight required for maintaining the system for the not just the near but the very far future, there are some alternative options for this glycol pipe that are expected to really push forth with a construction project that will run the piping outside on the side of Wyncote Elementary and underground, but underground at a level by which it can be accessed easily through access points, which is very different from the current setup where the glycol pipe is down quite a ways and also underneath a significant part of the building. So that is a project that we're waiting for some quotes for, and I'm very happy that we're looking at that because it will likely help us save some costs in case there are additional leaks in that system for the future. The challenge is that is a new building and that there had been investigation into whether or not there was some insurance claims to be made there. And at this point, there is nothing that has come up. So Mr. Teasdale did share just a small update regarding the snow removal updates amongst the district. I think we all recognize the efforts of all of those required from the maintenance staff who put in countless hours in clearing driveways and pathways and parking lots and applying salt to ensure that we could get in and out of our schools. And that process actually worked very well. Mr. Teasdale did note that there is quite a bit of aged equipment in the district, snow removal equipment in the district, some of which is going on close to 30 years old. And he's expected to provide us with some updates and quotations on a potential replacement for at least some, if not all, of those items going forward. Lastly, Mr. Teasdale updated us on the CSD school dude system, which is a district-wide system that is utilized to collect all of the work orders, collect and also assign and track all of the work orders across the district in order to provide a very clear, concise way of managing day-to-day operations and understanding any outstanding or nuisances any outstanding work or nuisances that could be impacting any of our buildings. That concludes my report. The facilities committee, I think we just heard the facilities committee will be meeting. I'm sorry, what was the date that we have for the facilities committee meeting?
April 6th, Charles.
April 6th, thank you very much. I found out that we're going after finance and that threw me off a little bit. Directly after finance this time, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Burdell Williams. Moving on to the liaison group, Mr. Cohen.
Yes, thank you. The liaison group met on Monday, February 22nd at 8 a.m. First on the agenda was follow up on the township's proposed stormwater fees. And these are fees that the township is exploring to be utilized to pay for stormwater management throughout the township. Next, there was discussion about land development updates in the township, and also a brief discussion about the township's comprehensive plan development, which I believe should be starting sometime this spring, and that would be a long-term plan for the future of the township. There was a discussion about an update on the name change of the Township's Human Relations Committee to the Civil Rights Task Force, and an update on the Township's Human Relations Commission. These are two separate bodies. The Civil Rights Task Force is made up of commissioners and residents, and the Human Relations Commission is getting training. There was related discussion about doing outreach for the school district on behalf of the township to different multicultural and Black student groups and parents to try to get more involvement on township advisory committees to get more diverse participation. There was a review of a HUB flyer, and HUB, again, is a township program that enables a police department to deliver valuable social services, and a discussion about that flyer that's being utilized for outreach. And there were some questions about the HUB program, and Dr. Marseille was supposed to follow up with Officer Sparanga, who is running that program for the police department. There was a discussion on bus routes and road work, and also tied into that, a discussion on traffic and crossing guards in school zones. There were condolences expressed by the township commissioners on the loss of one of our school district students. There was also a discussion then about COVID-19 and the weather at the time, and hybrid in-person decisions, and a range of issues that the school district was facing and is still facing, except I'm proud to say I don't control the weather, but I'm proud to say that as well. But also that hopefully we're not past the snow incidents that we were battling at the time of that meeting. There was then a discussion on a new scoreboard at the high school for the field. It turned out that apparently that was a rumor, but that did lead to some discussion about trying to long-term work to improve the fields and concession stands and the track of the high school, but that's long-term in the future, not on the drawing boards right now. Few more items of business were talked about. There was discussion on emergency alerts to residents by the township, and the township manager, Mr. Zinkowski, indicated that that's coming as part of a township website update, and that residents would have to register for emails about that. And under old business, there was a discussion about a series of traffic issues around the 309 and Greenwood Avenue area. And that included that the blinking lights on the Eastern Road Bridge on 309 were not working. They had not been working for years and years and years. Also about traffic backing up, driving from the north, driving south towards Philadelphia, stacking up beyond the left-hand turn lane onto Greenwood Avenue, and that causing traffic and safety issues. And then crosswalk issue at Greenwood Avenue, where there are not crosswalks going to the Towers property. The township manager indicated reach out to PennDOT about traffic light timing issues at Greenwood and the 309 interchange area, and the non-functioning blinking lights on 309 below East End Road. And that did result in the blinking lights being fixed, again, after years of not working. The next meeting of the liaison group is scheduled for March 15th at 8 a.m. And that completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Just briefly to comment, I'm glad that they weren't blaming the weather on the school district. That's good to know. And it's also good to hear that they finally got something done with that traffic situation at Greenwood Avenue. That has been a constant source of problems. So thank you for that report. Next up is the policy committee.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. The policy committee last met virtually via Zoom on Wednesday, March the 3rd at 8 a.m. And this meeting was rescheduled due to the weather, actually, and the schools closing on February the 18th. After roll call, the minutes of the January 27th, 2021 virtual meeting were approved before the committee turned to old business. This evening, there are several policies that are listed for adoption and others listed for repeal due to renumbering, renaming, and consolidation. I'll start with policy in AR 217, graduation requirements. This policy was updated to make it consistent with current graduation requirements, taking into consideration the alternative graduation requirements that will be in place for the graduating class of 2022. The alternate graduation requirements approved by the state legislature recently were presented at Educational Affairs Committee meeting a few months ago, probably several months ago at this point. And the related administrative regulation to implement policy 217 was also presented for review and posting. Next was policy in AR 11, curriculum and instructional management, which was renamed planning and preparation of instructional staff. This policy in AR includes expectations about instructional planning, but was noted it doesn't otherwise change anything substantively with respect to lesson planning. Next are policies 356, 456, and 556 regarding weapons. Those three policies have also been consolidated into policy 356. This policy outlines the situations when weapons can be used for instructional purposes and clarifies that under no circumstances loaded firearm by a teacher, staff, or student be permitted on school property. With the consolidation of these policies, policies 435 and 535 are presented this evening for repeal. Policy 141, Alternative Education for Disruptive Youth, is also presented this evening for repeal. This policy was the topic of extensive discussion at the January Policy Committee meeting. This policy is no longer required due to the state overhaul of this program as a result of litigation. So we'll continue to follow the requirements of state law, but otherwise this policy will be posted or at least presented this evening for repeal. Policy A and AR 314, Integrated Pest Management, is also presented this evening for adoption. This policy recognizes the district's commitment to integrate environmentally friendly resources for pest management for the safety of our custodial staff, students, and employees. This policy includes a cross-reference to the sustainability policy when it's actually adopted. Right now, we do have an existing policy that is being cross-referenced in this policy and AR. Since last month, there have been no changes to policy in AR 806 addressing child abuse. There were some formatting changes made to this policy and new language that was added to follow the new legal requirements. But otherwise, policy 806 is being presented this evening for adoption. Before proceeding to a short summary of first read policies, I'll call for a motion of adoption of policies 217, and I incorrectly said policy 111, it's actually policy 111, policy 356, and policy 314. And with adoption of these policies, I will also call for a motion for repeal of the following policies based either on renumbering and or consolidation. And those would be policies 456 and 556, policies 415 and 515, policies 435 and 535, and policy 141. So do I have a motion to both approve the policies for adoption and those policies just referenced for repeal?
So moved.
Mr. Schultz is the first. Do I have a second?
Second, Charles Burdell Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Burr Williams, for your second. Are there any board comments? Okay, seeing none, then all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Fishbein, for letting me ask for that motion. In terms of new business, the policy committee also discussed the following first read policies. First was consolidation of policies 309, 409, and 509, assignment and transfer into policy 309. This policy clarifies current procedures for assigning and transferring staff. Ms. Henry referenced policy, well, she referenced the computing grade point average and determining class rank. That policy is not on the agenda for first read this evening, and I wanted to just clarify as to why. It was posted as an agenda item for the policy committee, and for the reasons that Ms. Henry had indicated, we initially had the recommendation to look at this policy with the recommendation that we would eliminate class rank. But after further discussion among the policy committee and after further review of a related community member's email in terms of determining GPA. The policy committee determined that we would pen this policy until there was further discussion among the high school staff, as well as waiting for the feedback from the 2 community meetings that Ms. Henry had referenced. So that even though it's not on the agenda this evening as a first read, I thought it would be important to at least clarify for the board as to why we did not go forward with the first read of that policy as a recommendation of the policy committee. Policy in AR 140 on charter schools was updated to include the general guidelines for evaluating a charter school request under applicable law. And policy in AR 219, student complaint process, clarifies the student complaint process that is not otherwise covered in other board policies that include processes for filing a student complaint. Lastly, policy 200 regarding enrollment of students is posted for first read. This policy outlines the process for enrolling a student, and further discussion of the AR is needed, so we held that for the next policy committee meeting. The next policy committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, March the 24th at 8 a.m. and it will be by Zoom, and all are welcome to attend. Mr. Fishbein, that concludes my policy committee report.
Thank you, Ms. Haywood.
You're welcome.
Next, communications.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fishbein, I have a question about the policy committee matter.
Oh, sure.
Thank you. Looking at policy 140 for charter schools and also the AR, I realize that the AR is more just for informational purposes, but I do see a notable conflict. There's a few I want to bring to your attention, Ms. Haywood. The first is that the 140 AR refers to commercial organizations only in terms of, I think that it's financial interest matter. I don't have it in front of me. I'm reading notes at the same time I'm talking to you. And my question is, again, it refers only to commercial organizations only. As we know, charter schools are all nonprofits in Pennsylvania. So my first question is why it references commercial organizations when that would not be the case, since my understanding is all charter schools have to be nonprofits in Pennsylvania. And my second point tied into the AR for 140 is that it just talks about the applicant. And if the applicant is one individual representing the charter school, there could be a range of other individuals that are in leadership positions, including board members and board of trustees members, and also senior leadership staff that could also fall under having that financial interest, which would not have to report that per the current writing of the 140 AR. So those are my questions / comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to defer to Mr. Bruce to address those comments and questions. Mr. Cohen.
Actually, an applicant doesn't have to be the charter school itself. Frequently, the applicant is a commercial entity, or it could be another nonprofit entity, or it could be a person. So the applicant is not necessarily the charter school itself. If the charter school, generally speaking, somebody has to put the application together. Then if the charter school doesn't exist, doesn't have a duly constituted board at that point, then it could very well be some other organization. There are many organizations that apply for charter schools of various kinds.
Thank you. I appreciate that point of clarification. I still have a concern in that if it is a nonprofit organization which is applying for the charter school, then because of the current language, if I recall correctly, refers to a commercial entity, or if it's another nonprofit for that matter, which is not the charter school itself, then they would, I believe, not have to report those connections as well. And also, if it is an existing organization that's applying and they pick one individual to apply, other people that have a vested interest in leadership capacity for that charter school or that nascent charter school or existing charter school could, in my understanding, circumvent the process by having a party that does not have a financial interest in the for-profit commercial entity do the application. They could have, for example, John Doe, who has no financial interest, but there could be Jane Public, who's on the board, that has a financial interest, will not have to report it because the way the AR is currently worded.
Happy to take a look at the regulation. It's like, again, not something that has to come before board other than for information, but we're happy to discuss this with the policy committee offline.
I appreciate it. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Cohen, this is just a first read, so it will come back to the policy committee for further discussion anyway before it's presented next month for board approval.
Okay, thank
you.
So
thank you for raising those issues.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Any other questions about the policy committee presentation by Ms. Haywood? Seeing none, we can move to the next item on the agenda, which is communications. Ms. Lohman.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. The Communications Committee met via Zoom on Thursday, February 25th, 2021 at 7 p.m. Mr. Fishbein presided over the meeting, and Mr. Burdell Williams and I were present on behalf of the board. I believe 2 members of the public attended via Zoom. Following roll call and approval of minutes of the January 28th Communications Committee meeting, Mr. Kevin Kaufman, the District's Director of Communications, reviewed the district's monthly COVID-19 Road to Reopening outreach and its media relations. The presentation itself can be found on the district's website at https://www.cheltenham.org/page/3203. The communications team continues to push out timely, pertinent information to its constituents with regard to COVID-19 and school reopening. In the most recent month, Mr. Kaufman presented that more than 20 communications were released to various constituents. Updates to the district's Road to Reopening site were reviewed as well and included, and those updates included an updated COVID-19 monitoring form page and line item updates with regard to school exclusions and travel. The Road to Reopening site can be accessed under announcements on the district's homepage, and as was referenced by Dr. Marseille, includes a lot of information with regard to both state and federal policy regarding management of COVID-19 in schools, and also the district's own information about its COVID-19 management. Mr. Burdell Williams asked if the Road to Reopening site was getting hits, and Mr. Kaufman said that he could check on the analytics on that. Mr. Fishbein asked about the development of a COVID-19 dashboard to report to the community the number of COVID positive cases by building, as Dr. Marseille just reported. That has been developed and is now up and running on the district's website. The media relations presentation part of the meeting covered the different types of news media coverage that the district can receive, what constitutes newsworthy, and the difference between media mentions and earned media. Earned media involves publicity gained through promotional efforts, while media mentions occur when the district's brand is referenced in the local newspaper or on the internet, on social media, and the like. It was noted that the district does receive a lot of media mentions, probably due to its proximity to Philadelphia, the communication team's continued efforts to build relationships with members of the media, the district having famous alumni and the like. So there's a variety of different reasons why the district does receive a lot of media mentions. Mr. Kaufman also includes the media on the district's news share, which has also led to some stories being picked up. Several examples of media mentions and earned media in print were reviewed, followed by a screening of earned television news media clips that have occurred recently, some involving the district's efforts to reopen its school buildings, other ones involving a student at Wincode Elementary who won the spelling bee. So we've had some really good earned media mentions as well. The district's earned media plan involves looking to promote student-centered positive stories involving diversity and inclusion. And of course, the goal is always to be the first to fill the media vacuum with our side of the story. Post-pandemic, Mr. Kaufman said that he will have an editorial calendar to get stories out to the press. The board and Mr. Kaufman had a discussion then about getting students involved with the work of the Office of Communications. Mr. Kaufman mentioned that he had been trying to work with the Student Television Club at CHS to help with streaming of athletic events. It was noted that the district previously had more robust programming on its TV channels, Comcast Channel 42 and Verizon Channel 1960. Those stations used to feature content 5 nights a week, but due to a variety of factors, including some key faculty members leaving the district is not currently where it used to be with the use of its TV production studio at the high school. The meeting adjourned at approximately 8 p.m. The next committee meeting will be held via Zoom on Thursday, March 25th, 2021 at 7 p.m. And this ends my report.
Thank you, Ms. Lohman. Legislative, Ms. Haywood.
Thank you. As soon as I can get off mute. Thank you. The Montgomery County School Board Legislative Committee meets monthly to discuss proposed and adopted legislation at both the federal and the state level. And we also identify issues that may require some advocacy with our elected officials. Every month I share highlights of federal and state legislative updates with the community that impact public education. And this month, as always, I will have a few calls to action for your consideration. At the federal level, as everyone's well aware, the U.S. Senate just passed a $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill through the budget reconciliation process. In terms of education, this bill, called the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, includes about $126 billion for public schools, with 20% of the funding earmarked for learning loss. The Senate bill also carves out about $2.75 billion for governors to use for private schools, and includes $7.1 billion to provide direct funding for the digital gap. As Dr. Marseille kind of stated earlier, stay tuned to see how much of that will go to the states, and particularly the state of Pennsylvania, and hopefully will be earmarked to Cheltenham and other school districts in our region. Mr. Bordeaux-Williams also referenced in his report the assessment waiver request. And so the U.S. Department of Education issued guidance on assessment waivers and will allow states to extend the deadline for assessments given all of the uncertainties of COVID-19. The PA Department of Education, in response to the federal guidance, has announced its intent to extend the assessment window through September 2021. At the time, State Senators Lindsey Williams and Scott Martin sent a letter to President Biden, and at the time, Acting Secretary of Education Miguel Cordova, requesting that the U.S. Department of Education offer states an assessment waiver for the entire 2020 and 2021 school year because of COVID. Since that letter was sent to President Biden, now Secretary Miguel Cordova was confirmed as the U.S. Secretary of Education in a bipartisan vote of 64 to 33. Very different from the prior Secretary of Education, Secretary Cordova plans to focus his attention on returning students to in-classroom instruction, ensuring all students have access to high-quality schools with access to the arts and the sciences, supporting teacher quality and diversity, expanding high-quality preschool, and career and technical education. So I know that I look forward to those initiatives by the Secretary, and hopefully they'll trickle down to additional funding to the school districts. At the state side, last month I shared highlights of Governor Wolf's proposed budget for 21-22. And so I won't go over that in any real detail, except to say that the proposal includes a $1.3 billion investment in basic education funding, and all of that will be directed through the fair funding formula. In short, if this proposal were adopted tomorrow, which we know will probably not be adopted in full, we would receive an increase of approximately 47.5% increase of our 2019-2020 funding for basic education, and an 18.76% increase for special education funding. As was mentioned also earlier in Dr. Marseille's report, as part of Governor Wolf's proposed agenda, he had sweeping changes to the proposed charter school reform. And some of those changes really include putting together a per pupil dollar amount of $9,500 per pupil that public schools would pay to charter schools, which is a far cry less than we pay right now to charter schools when we send our students to a cyber charter or a charter school. It would also include some accountability for low performing charter and cyber charter schools that right now are not held to the same levels of accountability as our public schools. And why are we kind of keep on hammering on charter school reform this evening? We've said this a couple of times, and why is that important? Well, during our Financial Affairs Committee last week, the administration provided the board, again, with the cost of charter and cyber charter school tuition that we pay, and we pay approximately close to $41,000 per pupil for a special education student who goes to a charter school, and far cry above the $9,500 that's being proposed per student cost by Governor Wolf. And while Governor Wolf is not proposing any reduction in students being able to go to charter or cyber charter school, his proposal and the reforms that he's initiating would really result in considerable savings to Cheltenham and other schools for cyber charter cost. And how, again, would Governor Wolf pay for these changes? Again, it would be by increasing the personal income tax. And that money that would be raised would go to fund basic education funding for schools. And that would boost that total to be about $8.1 billion. So I know that increased funding to our school districts will have a concomitant effect on both our funding as well as what we have to spend for our education. And so, again, if you're inclined, the call to action would be to call your elected officials and let them know that you're supportive of Governor Wolf's proposal that would help fund public education, particularly basic education and special education, and provide an increase of funding to Cheltenham School District. And lastly, just to reiterate that we do have a legislative town hall scheduled for Monday, March 15th at 7 p.m. It's a Zoom meeting. And I hope that all on this call will be attending that call with our elected representatives. It's a real opportunity for us to engage with our elected officials and share with them both our priorities, our concerns, and our points of pride. So thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Haywood. It's now the administrative reports section of the meeting. Personnel, Ms. Tolbert-Jackson.
Yes, thank you. I am submitting the following action items for consent agenda. Number 1, appointment of administrator, A. 2, appointment of support staff, A. 3, approval of changes in assignment, A and B. 4, approval of leadership stipend positions, A. 5, extra duty, extra pay, A.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a
Second that motion.
Mr. England first, Ms. Haywood second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, that passes.
Thank you. The following are informational items. 1, retirements, A and B. 2, resignations, A through D. 3, non-discretionary leaves of absence, A and B.
Thank you, Ms. Tolbert Jackson. We'll move on to Educational Affairs, Dr. Smith.
Good evening. I'm presenting the following as a consent agenda. 1, approval of conferences A through C. 2, approval of educational service agreement. 3, approval of continuation of contract for 2020-21 school year. And 4, approval of volunteers.
Do I have a motion?
So move, Charles Burdell Williams.
First.
Second, Ms. Henry.
First, Charles Burdell Williams. Second, Ms. Henry. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed say nay. Aye. Hearing none, motion carries. Now we move up to Financial Affairs. I think it's Mr. Linderman.
Yes, we have in the consent agenda the approval of an agreement with Vulnerability Solutions for risk assessment in the schools, the bills for payment, and authorization to bid for the supplies for next school year.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second that motion, Ms. Haywood.
First, Mr. England. Second, Ms. Haywood. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Hearing none, that motion carries. And now we've reached the public comments on non-agenda items section of the meeting. I have gotten word that there is one raised hand who could not identify her place in the township, but she sent an email earlier. I know that she lives in Glenside. Lisa Rittler, I will call on you. You can unmute yourself and you should be able to speak.
Mr. Fishbein, isn't that the email that that we read?
Yeah, I believe she had another comment to make that's not on an agenda item.
Oh, okay.
But since you seem to be having problems, I'll come back to you. Ms. Maris from Wyncote, can you unmute yourself and speak?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Liza Maris. I'm an alumni and a resident and would like to speak in support of the demands from Police Free CSD. When I first heard about this group of young people, I agreed with them. Police are scary and they are not appropriate for children, except in the most extreme of circumstances. I also believed them when they said it disproportionately affected students of color and included students with disabilities. That's happening all over the country. But I was shocked to find, as I analyzed the data myself, that police presence has been increasing for 20 years. I was shocked to find that we have become one of the most policed districts in terms of arrests and referrals in the entire country. Some years having police being called almost every single day of the school year. Say what you want about the fight in 2017, police referrals were doubling every year ahead of that incident. But more concerning is that after the incident, you began to call the police to the K-4 elementary schools in staggering numbers. These 8-year-old children simply do not deserve that kind of punishment. They're little. They're little. Furthermore, this overuse of police is enshrined in your official documents outlining policies and procedures. This was not an accident. It was allowed and encouraged. Education folks will know the term in loco parentis. It essentially means that you are in many ways the legal parents during the school day. Cheltenham's policing policies state that you have certain rights when it comes to in loco parentis. But with that comes certain responsibilities as well. Now, clearly there are times in which parents would call the police on their own children. Think about that for a moment. What would it take for you to personally call the cops on your kid. Possibly you're thinking that for a very serious crime, you would want them to turn themselves in. Perhaps you would call for an extreme danger that they consistently bring to your home. Maybe you're thinking simply that you would never call the cops on your kid. Now, all people parent differently, but would anyone call the cops if they caught their kid smoking a cigarette out back? How about fighting a sibling, finding drugs in their bedroom, parking in front of their driveway? Obviously, there would be some kind of talking to or punishment or intervention that might occur, but cops? Entrance to the criminal justice system? We simply would not do that to our own children. So why are you willing to do it to somebody else's? There's obviously a breakdown between the board's mission and vision for the school and what's happening on the ground. So my question to you is this: are you willing to revise the MOU and your discipline policy to ensure that calls to police are for mandatory offenses only? Are you willing to take away the discretionary and recommended sections of the MOU entirely? If you do not, I fear that school leaders will continue to abuse not only the help of the police, but also the very students they have promised to educate and care for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maris. You can lower your hand. I've received a message that a board member is going to ask a question on behalf of a community member. Mr. Cohen.
Right, thank you, Mr. Fishbein. What I'm going to actually do is there's technology issues and Ms. Rittler reached out to me. She has my phone number. I'm going to put her on speakerphone. She'll ask her question by being on speakerphone and you'll hear the question when I put her on speakerphone in a minute. So thank you for bearing with me. Okay, Ms. Rittler, I'm putting you on speaker now and you can talk when you'd like to, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. I apologize for my Zoom not having any option to unmute. I'm on Zoom every day as a teacher, so I'm not sure where the technology problem is. I apologize. I wanted to give you a quick update on the email that I had sent to you yesterday. And I want to thank Dr. Lahara for getting in touch with me today and answering several questions that myself and many senior parent people have had. So what I want to ask of you is just to continue to raise your awareness of our concern to make sure that class of 2021 is celebrated in the same regard that other classes have been celebrated within the guidelines of the pandemic. Dr. Lahara committed to many fabulous things happening, which I don't want to go into detail because this meeting is long enough for all of you. And so, yeah, so my update to you is that Dr. Lahara and I have been in contact now since yesterday. Things are moving smoothly. I'm just asking you to continue to check in and make sure that all those things are happening. And I appreciate your support on that.
Thank you, Ms. Rittler.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
Well, this is a new one for me. It's good to have friends in high places. If only Lilia Marseille had that option, but I'm glad that she had the opportunity.
There are two things that have been brought to my attention. There is one open question that was posed by a community member from Glenside against our instructions, but I will read it into the record because he seems to be gone. Will the basketball hoops be put back up at Glenside Elementary this spring? And can one of the rims be lowered so that younger kids can play? That's from Justin Silverman in Glenside. I think Dr. Marseille may have alluded to the decision to open up our facilities to the public slower than getting our kids into the buildings and our athletes playing on the fields. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I'll say this. First and foremost, we're trying to build NBA champions, which is what Flurry's doing, so we're not lowering the rims. We're going to get people to work on their plyometrics. But jokingly, we are making arrangements for that to go up. Mr. Teasdale's working on that as well. With regards to the height, that's beyond my pay grade. I don't know who adjusts the height of the rims. I've been in this district for close to 6 years, and when I bring my daughter to Cheltenham Elementary when she was there, she had to get her A game on because they were at the traditional regular height. So they can talk to the building principal about what that looks like. I'm not really sure about the adjustments.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen brought to my attention that in the lead up to this meeting, there was a recognition that we needed to appoint the tax collector. Mr. Schultz raised that in the Financial Affairs Committee report, and I don't
believe we need to do that.
Oh, okay. I was
Mr. Roos, I think, addressed that in communication, but I'll let Mr. Roos clarify if I'm mistaken.
The school district is not the appointing authority for an interim tax collector. That's the municipality that does that, not the school district.
My apologies. I do recall having heard that. I forgot that when Mr. Cohen asked the question. So there are no further public comments. Response to prior public questions, Dr. Marseille.
Thank you. We had a number of questions that we went through from prior comment. If I may, one was from Rob Greenbaum, who asked what requirements, if any, or certifications are mandated for adults to monitor the classroom to allow a teacher to teach remotely. There's a number of requirements with regards to individuals, A, who want to be classroom teachers, who require a 4-year degree and a number of praxis exams you have to pass in your subject area. With regards for those who want to be substitutes, you do have to have either an associate's degree or 60 credits. Individuals who have less than 60 credits are able to provide support as an aide, like the way we have our lunch and recess aides. We did share that information in in letters to the community that highlighted Kelly services and the requirements that are needed. There was a similar question from Marissa Blumstein, who said, what are the requirements for monitoring class to allow teachers to teach remotely? I just addressed that. And her second question was, what are the teachers who have been on leave allowed to change their minds if they go back to remote model? A significant number of the teachers at the high school are teaching remotely. Novice from Glenside asked, since cohort A has not had a chance to actually be in person due to weather and functional closures, would it be possible to allow this cohort to be in person at least once before they graduate? We would love for that to happen, and we believe that with the additional vaccination, the anticipated return of some staff as a result of dates they've given us before, and with the vaccination, that we definitely, I don't want to say definitely, we really hope that we can make that happen. Autumn Angeletti asked a question about the presence of Cheltenham police vehicles in the parking lots of school districts upon reopening. That has been a practice that has happened in every school district I've been in at the opening of school. And that is because we contact the police to ask to support with traffic. As you know, that the first week of school is a tremendous heavy traffic pattern. So we do ask our police officers not only on site, but also in the general area as well to help with traffic flow. So that is why some may have seen a large presence of police officers across the district the first week of school, as that has been tradition to help us with that. And I contact Chief Fry and his team to ask for supports, especially as well as crossing guard supports as well. Justin Silverman asked from Glenside, do you think August is a realistic opening date? And is there a budget issue to hire teachers or bring teachers in from private schools? I would love to believe that August is a date for us to return in the fall, barring any other mitigation factors, or I shouldn't say mitigation factors, other regulations are put into place. I don't believe that is the case, so I am optimistic. Is there a budgeting issue to hire teachers? Absolutely, there is. And could we bring teachers from private schools? I don't believe that's the case. There is a teacher substitute shortage, so there is not a group of individuals sitting waiting for us to call them. So that is not a possibility. We are working through our 3 partners to try to get substitutes into the district. Ms. Elsa did not provide residential information, but I'll read it anyway for the record. What qualifications for a person to be able to come and sit with students? I shared that in a previous response. Then we have Luis Riaz, who asked a series of questions, but the vast majority were commentary and support of police-free CSD. It indicated that why were students, parents, and staff not included as vital stakeholders on the pandemic team in developing the health and safety plan? Students and staff are the most directly impacted by the plan. Why were they not included? Perhaps if they were, the district would not be in the position in regards to high school now. Matter of fact, Ms. Louise Riaz is incorrect. They were included. We had reopening committees where they provided input on the health and safety plan. We indicated the individuals on the plan who were individuals responsible for the implementation of the plan. Reason why we didn't list the students and or others in there, it has to be people who actually can implement the plan, and as reflective in all the plans in Montgomery County or in the Commonwealth. So parents, students did sit on our reopening committee, and they did provide input and help to develop that health and safety plan. There was another question in her statement that spoke to police-free CSD and have administrators and staff receive training on how to lead restorative conversations in circles. That answer is yes, and they have been. When and where are we implementing restorative practices in CSD? K through 12 is where we are implementing that. And the question is, how can we expand those and do away with more punitive approaches? Our data shows, and we shared this data, that the manner in which we are approaching discipline is significantly different. The numbers have dropped significantly as a result of restorative practices, as a result of our Swiss program that we have, as a result of professional development that we are putting our teachers through in terms of the way in which they interpret behavior. We know that depending on race and gender, behavior is classified and identified very differently. Black boys, when they behave, are 10 times more likely to be given a referral than any other student who does the same behavior. So there's a lot of professional that has gone place in order to do that. And our staff has welcomed the opportunity to rethink the way in which we react to our students and the way in which we provide support mechanisms before it gets to a significant disciplinary action. The rest of the comments were about police-free CSD. There was, I'm sorry, Cherie Leather from Elkins Park asked, please tell me how our students compare to students in other districts. They are in full-time. Souderton, thank you. It varies significantly when you talk about other districts in Montgomery County, specifically to Souderton. Souderton School District early on committed to bringing students back, but in that committing back, they made some trade-offs in terms of how they were going to do that. There's a ongoing debate right now about whether or not we can bring students back within 3 feet to get more kids into the building, but it would be very difficult for me to answer your question because the districts, Abington has a hybrid model that they are doing Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, 4 days a week in person. Hatboro-Horsham has K-1 in their district that is 5 days. Grades 2 through 5 are hybrid in person, 5 days a week, Tuesday, Thursday, or Wednesday, Friday, with Monday alternating in person. So it is a smorgasbord in terms of the way in which some districts are operating. There are districts who the vast majority did come back a lot earlier than we did. And then they're reshifting their plans moving forward for the rest of the school year. Mr. Fishbein, those were the questions. I'm sorry, there's another question, I apologize, from Sandra Robinson, who did not give her residence, but will share that. Please provide what guidance the township is providing for teachers along with staff. Is there a push by the township to work with the county to prioritize vaccines for the school employees so they can reopen safely? There appears to be very little guidance from the township and its leadership across the board and little transparency. I have not spoken to the township, and it's not because they're not willing to provide support, but because my conversations have been directly with the PA Department of Health, the Montgomery County Department of Health, and with CHOP, who I think are in a better position to provide the district with the responses that they are looking for. So I have not brought that up, any concerns around vaccination to the township because we've been working with our medical experts on the ground to do that. And in light of the fact that we have been providing prior to the J&J vaccination, that we have been following PA guidelines with regards to individuals who fit in that phase 1A category and providing them the information, the opportunity to get vaccinated. And now the Moderna and Pfizer as well, and along with J&J. So we are confident that we're over that significant hump. It's a matter of if people are really going to stick to their commitment and their schedule with getting the vaccine. And I think that is it, Mr. Fishbein. If not, I will double check and come back next time, or a community member will tell me that I failed to read it, and that's fine, and we can do that. But my records show that I attempted to address what I have on these 10 pages.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marseille. I think that takes us to the information future meetings as listed, all by Zoom unless otherwise stated. And Then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Bill England.
Mr. England, do I have a second?
Second, Charles Burdell Williams.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.